TikTok, it's time to rock. Welcome to the channel, folks. Welcome to a special anniversary show here that we've managed to organise, in particular through the hard work and effort of our good brother John Conklin. Thank you, John, for raising the flag and the banner for this important occasion for us to get together and celebrate. How many years, John, since this album came out?
40. I was 2 years old.
How come I see two Johns?
Yeah, we got two Johns,
There's
man.
two Johns.
Yeah, I see
Oh
two
my
Johns.
gosh.
Evil-
How do we get two Johns?
my evil-
Yeah.
I can't tell which is the real one.
Fuck you, John. You're an asshole. That one.
The one on the
How
top
do we
right has
get
7
two
fingers. I
Johns?
spotted the imposter. He's up there.
Yeah. Well done. How did you get in here twice, John?
Here.
Hey,
We
listen.
need two more. Where's the old guy, the Goober gun grip or whatever his name is? George Goebel.
George
Paul
Gold.
Lind. Where's Paul Lind?
Paul Lynn. There we go. That's our generation.
Circle gets a square.
So we're worldwide here. We got Philadelphia on the bottom there, Les and Jimmy. We got Oklahoma, Greg. We got Tanner, Vermont. We got Alan in Texas. We got me in New York. We got Chris in New Jersey. And we got Andrew in New Zealand.
Yeah. Fantastic. And thank you guys for taking some time out of your busy lives to come here on the channel and talk about, like we said before we realized there were two Johnnies in here, this great album and this great band. And we were just talking in the green room before, Greg, with Alan and Chris in particular, about, where's the time gone? 40 years ago, this album came out, Greg. Incredible.
Yeah. I remember getting it. I remember, getting it that day. I was studying for a final, and I kind of snuck out and went and got it. And I loved. I from the moment I even heard, why can't this be love? A lot of people, were turned on to the keyboards, but that like helicopter sound. I was like, what is this? And then, a great song is a great song, whether it's that or Jump. I really had no problem with the keyboards.
Yeah.
Sounded great. And then,
Okay.
you start off with like, I don't know, Good Enough or what. I mean, come on,
You can actually hear on that album the energy. I think you could feel it. That it was like they were into it. It was a good vibe to that album, the whole album. I don't expect that in balance as much as I get sucked in 5150. I think it was just something new, and I guess they were just really into it. I don't know. I think it's palpable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No question.
Greg, you hearing us?
Greg, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can't really hear you guys.
Okay.
Drop out and come back in, Greg. It's one of those voodoo things that works really well on StreamYard. So drop out and hit that link
Can you guys
and
hear
come
me?
back in.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear
Yeah, we
it.
can hear you. But
Hopefully it'll improve.
If it doesn't, drop out and come back in, and maybe it'll be better.
Okay.
And maybe we'll get two of you when you do that.
Okay. Well, I guess we can individually go through and just kind of give our shot about how we came to the album, and and so Jimmy gave us his spiel. How about Lester?
So I heard the album, and my dad had the album, and I remember he had the cassette, and I was just listening to it. I remember hearing, like, why can't this be love? I was like, is that a synth or a guitar? You didn't have the internet really to figure it out. And I was like, it could be a synth, or guitar, because you never know what he's up to. So I like the song, Summer Nights. All the songs are great. And then here comes before the internet wars of who's the better singer than singer today kind of thing. Songs were just great. I liked it. I liked what I heard. It wasn't 1984, but that was cool. It was just a great album. I think I was 13, riding on my bike, listening to that album the whole time. And the guitars sounded great, and it was different. But it's a little bit more keyboard song. That's cool. Cool song.
Interesting that Greg held up that magazine, because that was something I noticed about like Circus and Hit Parader. A lot of times they would, I mean, that was it was always the article was always Van Halen, David Lee Roth. So often those are unusual, because most of those magazines would actually show pictures of the old, usually like 1984 at that point was as much as they had. So those first couple of photo shoots that they did, that Greg's holding up now, those were the very early days. So that's probably right. Those shoots were probably done slightly before the album dropped, and just maybe while they were finishing up mixing. And so you get the Circus and you get Hit Parader, it'd be like a cover story, and it would literally show Eddie from the '84 tour.
Right.
And then the article would be all about 5150, and they went on like that for a while. It's funny. They didn't have there weren't a lot of contemporaneous pictures of the 5150 tour in a lot of those magazines for some reason. I don't know why that is.
Budget.
There's that a friend of mine is from Louisiana, and there was a photograph from the first night of the tour that kind of was shot down the barricade. I don't know if you guys have seen that picture. And yeah, I that newspaper picture didn't go national, obviously, but yeah, like there was this lag before we could like see. Like I'm pretty sure when I saw the 5150 tour, I don't think I had seen any pictures of it in any magazines. If it was, maybe it was like a small thing in Rolling Stone or something like that. There was no like, it just took a while for that, because the magazine lag was like usually like Chris would probably remember better than I would, 2+ months of like before like the news actually went from like reality to like it was in your hands in a magazine.
Yeah, it's 3 months. 3 months actually was pretty much like when you got the initial thing, and then by the time it hit the press was about 3
Right.
months. Yeah, it was ages. It was like well past. Rolling Stone had a little bit of an advantage because they were, I think, bi-weekly, I believe, or something
Right.
like that. So they could kind of beat the monthly publications. I mean,
Right.
we'll talk about this, but like the whole Roth's departure and everything like that. And Greg, you did some really excellent research on that, to debunk the whole April Fool's Day bullshit. But Rolling Stone basically was kind of on the ball. That was like where you went to find out, was Dave in or out, and everything. And that's where I just remember me and my friends were all like constantly reading, like, what's going on with Van Halen? What's going on
Right.
with Dave? What's going on, and, it was interesting. But Rolling Stone was really, when I think back about that, Rolling Stone was what, because we all like voraciously read all the stuff, out there, all those magazines. They're in the LA area where I was living at the time. BAM magazine was another thing. That was actually, also a bi-weekly. Yeah, there you go. And so that's you got your news either in BAM or Rolling Stone pretty much. And then the monthly magazines like Musician and, Guitar Player was really pretty much behind the times. I mean, unfortunately, but Guitar World, Guitar with a Practicing Musician, all those other publications, it was like usually 3 months after the fact.
Right.
Going down. Radio stations to a certain extent too helped out a little bit, but they weren't really 100% keyed in either. So.
Right. I do remember the Guitar for the Practicing Musician. It made they had I don't remember who wrote the kind of like, it wasn't really a gossip column. It was like a news shorts column. Like all the stuff would be like put together, and they like kind of talked about like Eddie and Patti Smythe playing together, and there was sort of this like wink about like, is it more than just a band or something like that. I'm sure that didn't go over too well over at Coldwater Canyon, but that that was the sort of stuff that you was like these like fragments of stuff before. I always say, like, for me, the divorced parents, like, like dad is actually like taking a shit and leaving the house, was like when I saw Eddie and Hagar together at Farm Aid, I was like, it's really over. It's really over. It's really over.
Wow.
That was like, I knew for now.
Well, that touches on the prehistory of 5150 and, the Patti Smythe thing. For some reason, Patti refuses to talk about it. I mean, she just doesn't talk about it. She's point blank like, I'd rather not talk about what happened with that situation. Right. And it was a real situation. I mean, I think Edward really did want to get her in the band.
100%.
And I think I don't know if it got to the point of a rehearsal. Something weird happened, and Patty's uncomfortable with talking about it.
Well, what Patti said more recently was that she was pregnant, and that she just didn't want to be around this hard partying band because she knew how Ed was. She knew how Ed and Val were. And everything from socializing with them, and thought, gosh, do I want to go on the road with this while I'm pregnant with a child?
Right.
And everything, or even after I've had my child.
Right.
You know, and maybe I want to have my child out on the road with me or whatever. And do I want to be around this you know, this madness 24/7?
Right.
And I think
Right.
she wisely said pass. But
Yeah.
you know, the funny thing is that all this stuff was happening at light speed. You know, when you put the timeline together of everything that happened with Roth's departure, which I'd kind of like to talk about, actually, if we can transition to that, was really how, you know, through all my research and going through the interviews and everything and kind of reading between the lines, I don't think it was really that Dave quit or Dave was fired. I just think it was, you know, what we have here is failure to communicate, you know, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was just, you know, cross signals. You know, the more I've read about that meeting that happened in March of 1985, that basically Ed was, you know, they were trying to do 5150. Basically, they had some songs written. Dave wasn't into it. He was just, you know, singing mumbo jumbo and singing other bands' lyrics to the music that Ed was writing, and wasn't seriously into that. Then stopped showing up for, you know, the pre-rehearsals and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the writing sessions and everything,
Mm-hmm.
and was disinterested, was out promoting, you know, Crazy from the Heat. And then of course the movie offer comes in, and you know, but they had that meeting, and it's like, okay, Dave comes up and like, I want you guys to do, you know, I want Van Halen to be, you know, do the music for the soundtrack, you know, the score for this thing, you know. And Ed's like, I want to do a new album and tour. And then Roth is like, well, let's go on tour, but Ed's like, I don't want to go on tour without a new album.
Right.
You know, and they went back and forth, and they kind of reached this point where they didn't reach an agreement. They kind of just went their separate ways. And Dave just continued on, you know, as he was wont to do, because he's got this $20 million movie contract hanging over his head. Right. You know, he's not going to walk away from that. And I don't blame him. I mean, my gosh, you know, that's a huge thing.
Yeah. And, I was going to add to what Chris said. The story that Don told me was that, you know, that things were getting fractious, and that Ed was saying, I can't talk to Dave anymore, or something like that. Like, I can't stand the guy. I can't talk to him. And Don was up there every day and was trying to sort of patch things along, and said, okay, here, give me the demos and I'll meet Dave here at 5150. And he told Ed, go to the house. Do not come to that. Don't come. Just go to the house and hang out for an hour, and then I'll call you when he's gone. And Dave just came up to pick up a cassette, and like Ed must have heard the car, whatever, knew he was there, and like came in, and they just started screaming at each other. And Don said it was like the worst fight he'd ever heard for like intensity or whatever. And he left. He just like left, and he said, I never saw Dave at 5150 again. So I assume that was after all of the, you know, when they tried to rehearse or whatever they tried to do with like, you know, tried to like to get in the same room and play music. But that was, Don said he never saw Dave at 5150 again.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's got to be first time I've heard that. I don't think you've mentioned that anywhere.
Yeah. And that's a big thing too. And I think it was just, but reading what Ed talked to Rosen, Rosen was talking with him a lot, and it sounded like Ed still thought that Dave was there, and I think, the plan was, of course, to do this all-star, multiple lead singer thing with like Joe Cocker,
right,
and Phil Collins and all these other people. And, and Alex put the kibosh on that. And again, you're talking about this period of like, March, mid to late March until like, Sammy's in the band basically officially, even though it's not announced to the world at large, but the audition takes place on, I think it was July 15th, I believe, of 1985, that's when he showed up, and they said like, yeah, he's the guy. But think about that. It's like, okay, you've got the whole month of April, the whole month of May, the whole month of June. That's 3 months. And what happens in that period? Ed's considering doing this multi-singer project. He's considering getting Patti Smythe in. He's considering a number of other people possibly for the band and everything.
Mm-hmm. They went, Don also told me that, Rosen dates those phone calls in the book. I don't have the book. Unfortunately, the copy of the book is upstairs, but he talks like when Ed called and said he really did it. He's really, I can't believe he's gone or whatever, like, and called Rosen. Rosen had knows those dates. You can actually see the dates that Rosen took and then to know when Ed called and was like, Roth is gone. But, right soon after Roth exited or was fired, whatever, Don was of the opinion that they should, wait for Dave to come back. Basically, like, he's going to come back or whatever. We'll do this solo record. We're going to do the multi-singer solo record. He's going to come back. Like, he'll come back. And
Ed
Dave
seems
was
shared that opinion too. That's in the Rosen interviews
Right.
if you read them, because even like he
Right.
says like, oh, he did an interview with Eddie the night before Sammy. That's why we knew that Sammy joined the band or
Right.
did the audition
Right.
on July 15th, because
Right.
even then he was like expecting like Dave to
Right.
call.
Right.
You
And that's
know?
right. Ed so Don said that Ed was like, we're going, we got to go. We're going to go talk to this singer. And Don went along with it, like, but he said he like really was like, I'm not trying to drag his feet, but was basically trying to be like, oh, come on, like, whatever. We shouldn't be looking for another singer. We've got Dave. He'll come back. And they went and they met with Jimmy Barnes. So when Jimmy Barnes tells the story, he says, I met with Ted Templeman and Ed. It wasn't Ted Templeman. It was Don and Ed who went to the house. And Jimmy Barnes said, I got to deal with Geffen or something, and I'm going to do my own thing in America or whatever. So I'm not interested. But like, that's where like Don's basic message to me was like that Ed was bound and determined. When he was like done with him, he was like, we're gonna fuck him, we're gonna get another singer, like we're getting another singer. So whether it was Patty Smythe, Jimmy Barnes, was like he was gonna find the guy, and they were gonna move on without Roth.
Well, that's Ed too. And I think the catalyst of it all was when he got news, when Billy Sheehan called, and basically because Dave was forging ahead with, working on the film and everything like that. And he put together a band, and he had contacted Yngwie Malmsteen, who Malmsteen turned down the offer. But
Can you imagine?
Accepted.
Yeah.
But obviously.
Would have been a disaster.
Yeah. Oh, it would have been oh my God. Just think of the fights. Just think of it. I mean, my God. Talk about Clash of the Titan egos.
Right.
That would have been like, oh my God. But yeah, it's like, but the news got out, and Sheehan called up and talked to Ed and said like, hey, Dave's asked me to join, and do you mind, and everything like that. And Ed was like, yeah, whatever, but Ed's like, fuck that bastard, and he thought that Dave was putting together another band, a new band without them, and everything. And that was the turning point. And that's when, the Jimmy Barnes thing, the Eric Martin, Patty Smythe, and then, the Sammy, the matchmaking with Claudio and everything happens. And
Greg, you said in your TED book, I think Ted was concerned only when he saw Ed hanging around with Sammy. He thought that they would make up too after a few months. They'd fight, and like normal, they'd get back together. But when he saw Sammy in there, he said, "Uh-oh."
Yeah, I think that,
Sammy, but
right. The thing was that Ted, when they split, Ted said he thought it was going to be like the Aerosmith thing. He had just gone through that with Aerosmith. Like Aerosmith split up, and they did a couple of records with with other musicians without the original lineup with Joe Perry, and so that's what Ted thought. Ted was going to be like, okay, these guys are like pissed off at each other. They just need some breathing room or whatever. Well, and it'll. He certainly thought after Eat 'Em and Smile, for sure. He still had that belief that there was just going to be this reconciliation. But yes, he never wanted, Dave. We all know he didn't want Dave to leave. He wanted the original lineup to stay together and was like definitely against it. There's a story I think talked a little bit about in the book, but it was a pretty intense conversation between him and Ed Loeffler, where Loeffler took, I think it was just Loeffler and Ted went out to lunch, and Loeffler was managing Hagar, and I'm not sure he had been sort of officially signed as Van Halen's manager, but obviously he was like lined up for that job, and that was like teed up for him. And he was like, Ted, and Ted knew Loeffler from doing the Hagar solo stuff, right? And so he was like, I want you to produce the record. And he's like, I'm not going to do it. And he's like, I'm not going to do it. Especially if you're going to call it Van Halen, I'm not going to do it. And Loeffler got really angry. Loeffler is like, in Sammy's mind has been understandably like a beloved figure, but like Ted said, it was a really unpleasant conversation because basically like Loeffler felt like Ted was sabotaging his like big chance, so to speak, right? Like he had, this was like his chance to take the leap, which it was, of course, to leap into the big time of rock management. And so, Ted didn't have the power to like stop it, obviously, but like Loeffler felt like if he had Ted's endorsement, like it would have been like a done deal that day. Like, yeah, if Ted's producing, then Warner Brothers is going to say, sure, we're all for this and whatever. There's going to be no like, oh, should you change the band name? Whatever, should you guys, whatever sort of moments of pause and sort of, is this going to be workable that the president at Warner Brothers, Lenny Waronker, and the other people there certainly were like, this may not be as great as we think, even though it might work on paper. Ted wasn't like a veto power. We could stop it, but Loeffler was extremely just say annoyed. I'll just say that it was not a pleasant conversation. It was just like,
well, that brings up another key aspect of what happened here of just, this, shit hitting the fan kind of situation. I mean, you have Dave, venturing off into Hollywood, and the film world and everything. And, right after this contentious meeting that they have, they fire Noel Monk. Noel comes to them with, he wants to renegotiate his contract, and Ed and Alex look at it, and I'm sure Mike does too, even though Mike never gets a say in anything. But Noel Monk was going to make more than any member of the band, from it. And they just said, screw this guy. He's fired, And so there's no mediator during this period. They have all this stuff boiling.
Right.
And they've got nobody to say, like, well, let me talk to Dave for you. I mean, like, Don tried to do it, obviously, like you said, but Don really wasn't in the position to do that. No. I'm sure in Dave's mind, he's thinking like, well, he's Ed's buddy.
Right.
Because he's got Pete Angelus, on his side and everything. He kind of takes off with them. And I read just somewhere the other day that, like, when Dave left, that he took like 60 members of the Van Halen entourage with him.
Supposedly, that's the number. Yeah, I think a lot of those guys probably just thought like the Van Halen brothers were they're
probably just looking for the next gig.
Right. And like there was definitely probably a concern that there was going to be some slow momentum up there with the way things were going. I mean, look, the reality was like Ed wasn't in great shape. I mean, you can look at all those guys and say whatever you want, but like the reality was, I'm just telling you from the way Templeman saw it, he wasn't trying to bag on Ted. It was like there was like a lot of pressure on Ed, and he was like, obviously the 1984 production debacle, like that was, again, I know we're not on 1986 yet, but I'll just say as a lead up to 1986, that Ted's position was always like the solo album was meant to be, the solo EP was meant to give Ed time to just basically step back and not have to go like right back into the studio and make another record. He just felt like he was like burned out. He and Alex were like kind of like fried, and like Dave still wanted to work, and he said, okay, we'll do 4 songs, no Van Halen songs. And again, I think Ted would be the first person to tell you that in retrospect that was a miscalculation, and it was misperceived, rightfully or wrongly, it was misperceived, and it was a definitely a bad, had a bad effect on the relationship between the brothers and Roth. But that was always Ted's position, that it was like basically like, I'm giving these guys breathing room, like Van Halen's name's out there, and they don't have to do anything for 6 months except kind of like just, again, whatever. They've been like going kind of nonstop since forever.
Yeah.
But it didn't work.
I'm glad you touched on that period, because there was so much chaos going on around the whole situation. And like you said, like Chris said, a Monk being out. Other kind of funny thing was that in that summer of '85, of course, we've got like Wildlife coming out. Of course, most of that was sort of leftovers and patch up from '84 sessions and things he was working on. But then Ed goes and does the Hard Rock giveaway. He does the both Letterman appearances in May, mid-May, and then Rudy actually leaves, not to go with Dave, but to go with Motley Crue.
Right.
And that was like you were describing. That's a guy that's looking to work.
Right.
Because he's not 100% that
you're not on retainer.
Do a tour.
Right. You're not doing. They don't have those guys on retainer. They're not like giving those guys like checks. Like, just real quick. I mean, I think like the Doobie Brothers, however their corporation worked, was like the Dubro Corporation. Like the guys who were on the crew were like salaried employees who probably, I can't 100% be sure of that, but I think they were like salaried employees where they were getting checks. Like I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think that was the way it worked with the Van Halen crew.
That's not generally how it works with most crews. Everybody's just like on the tour, even though you might work with the same guys for many, many years. And I know a lot of pro techs and stuff, that it's always just you're catching as catch can, and nobody's guaranteed anything. It's a rough life.
The just real quick, I will make it as brief as possible. Is that the Angelus story too? I talked to Angelus for the Templeman book a little bit, just kind of like on background. He talked about that effort he tried to make to sort of like have a peace meeting, like where he got those guys. I think it was on the phone on a conference call, and said like, look, here's what's going to happen. We're basically going to pause everything, and then that's where Roth talks about like 2 weeks later I'm opening up Rolling Stone magazine and I see that I'm looking for they're looking for a new singer. But Angelus said straight up like he felt whatever if he was probably viewed as like not a fair dealer, but like Angelus really felt like he was trying to preserve, again, maybe, just to keep both things going, the Ross solo thing and the Van Halen going, but he really felt that he was trying to preserve like the band as a entity. And like he was actually like shocked and really pissed off that it was like, we're looking for a new lead singer, because he felt like on that phone call there was an agreement like, okay, Ed's going to do a solo album and Dave's going to do his solo thing. That was like basically like the sort of the mob meeting of all those guys to be like, this is how it's going to work. And like 2 weeks later it was, or whatever it was, like a month later, there was this new thing that Angelus saw and was like, holy shit, I can't believe it didn't actually stick.
Well, it was failure to communicate. These guys weren't talking. They were hard-headed. Dave obviously wasn't going to budge on the film project whatsoever. Right. I think Ed really wanted him to just drop out and like, you're a member of Van Halen, you're going to do this. You're going to make another record, and then we'll go out on tour. And I just think, and then, Dave just, again, you can't blame him. It was such a lucrative thing. It was such a creative thing. It was a break into an entirely new world. And my God, it's Hollywood. I mean, that's the big time, it's the music industry is one thing, but Hollywood is just so much bigger than all of that. And he was getting the red carpet rolled out for him at the time. And you can't blame him for wanting to do that. But again, like I said, it's like, then he's putting, he needs to put together some type of band to play music for this thing, and I've read the script, but whatever music he wanted to do, he wanted to be Van Halen-esque, so he had to get a hot shot guitarist. He calls up Yngwie, he calls up Billy Sheehan, and Ed takes that the wrong way, thinking like, oh, he's just forming a new band, which it turned out to be a new band for him conveniently. But I think, Roth kind of gets the hard end of the stick here. And I think it was just Ed, like, not wanting to hear anything, but, my way or the highway. Right. And then it's just like, he's like, screw that guy. And I'm going to go off and find my own singer and do my own thing, And I mean, it boggles the mind to think about how it went from this multi-singer project to all these various people they consider to. Next thing you know, Sammy's in the band over the 3-month period, essentially. And really, it was less than that. It was really about a period of a month, because I think when he found out about the whole Yngwie and Billy Sheehan thing was in June of 1985. Yeah. So I think he just went gung-ho trying to find, these people, and he just threw it out there like, do this. Are you available? Are you available? Let's try this person. Let's try this person. Then
when you hear Dave talking during that period, Dave's thing that he always went back to really was that those guys wanted to sit in the studio and have a studio tan, and I wanted to go out and tour.
Well, he wanted to do like keep the tour thing going, do a big stadium tour.
Right, right. But I think also that I give Dave credit, because for Dave, when Dave would be working, he didn't ever live with the albums the way that Edward did, obviously, because Edward's writing all the instrumental music for the album, and Dave is, at best he's going in the typical thing. And Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but the typical thing, as I understand it, was they would go in, Dave would do some scratch vocals with rough lyrics, and then once all the instrumental stuff was recorded that way, then with various albums having different sort of outcomes, but it would be like Ted would go in and coach Dave on not that Ted, and not to say that Ted wrote anything or whatever, but he helped Dave edit his lyrics and form his thoughts and form his vocal melodies and put together parts and everything. So, but that's a thing that happens sort of on the back end. So for Dave, it would have really been at that point, well, I got to wait around for Edward to come up with an album, and that could be, who knows? I've got this money from Hollywood, like you say, So it's like, Dave's kind of. He's not being disingenuous when he was saying that, oh, these guys want to sit in the studio for X amount of time.
So it was a tumultuous time, obviously. As you get into the summer of 1985, they're fielding their own management phone calls because they don't have a manager. 60 people leave and go with Roth. Hagar comes into the picture. He says the place is a pigsty. He said it was disgusting. He was shocked the condition that they were in and the place was in, and is like not sure that he even wants to get involved in this, because he's like, when I got there, he goes, it was unbelievable that they were actually answering phone call, like management type of phone calls, the two brothers. It was just like, what am I getting myself into? I don't know, but
and the whole power move of which probably wasn't initially a power move, but the fact that 5150 Studios was created in the first place, and Don
Oh,
would
for sure.
obviously speak to that right there created an imbalance of power where it's Edwards' band 100%. If it ever was, more equal, by the time 5150 Studio was put together, by Don and Ed, and they were off to the races.
Right.
That even shifts Ted a little bit out of the picture at that point.
Howdy Doody Mountain.
Yeah.
So
Terry?
I will say this about Sammy. I mean, Sammy's kind of sold this story. I think he's probably lightened it up a little bit. There's a period where he's pretty braggadocious about a lot of stuff. Saying like, "Oh, all my albums were platinum when they called me." But it was a big risk. Because he didn't have any platinum albums. I mean, he had momentum on VOA. Thanks to I Can't Drive 55 and everything in MTV and everything. But the album was certified gold. It wasn't certified platinum until after he joined Van Halen. So he had 0 platinum albums in his entire career by the time he joined Van Halen. Van Halen, every album had been certified platinum in one form or the other. And I think in 1984, by that point, was 5 times platinum.
I think that rubbed us all the wrong way.
Let me check the facts.
He said
I've been waiting for this prop. Thank you, Chris. You gave me the right reason.
He said I was selling out the same arenas that they were, but meanwhile they were like multiple nights. I went back and looked, and he was selling one night. They were selling out like 2 or 3 nights.
Exactly. That's the thing,
He took a pay cut to join them. I mean, what else was he saying? He was like,
he made it sound like he was even bigger than Van Halen.
Exactly.
It wasn't. It was a risk on their part to bring him in. I mean, he had a hit. I remember I Can't Drive 55 all over MTV. At that period,
song,
and it was a hit. It was a bona fide hit and everything like that. But I mean, come on, he had Hager, Sean Harrison, Shreve before.
Just about to say that, yeah.
It fizzled out. But I kind of, when I wrote the history, the retrospective thing on it, it's like he was a team player. Sammy could be a team player, and he was a team player. And that's I think why Ed liked him. He was a dude. He was agreeable. You could get along with him. And everything, but he wasn't this mega superstar, coming out to help out lowly Van Halen, and everything. And I think a lot of that's, he overhyped it, and a lot of the fans sucked it up and everything, and ate it. And you know what? He carried them through a tough period, and they still succeeded. And that's a hard thing to do in this business, as they learned later with Van Halen 3. But it's so credit to Sammy for that. But yeah, this whole like him selling everything and stuff. No, Sammy, you had everything to gain by joining this band, and it was good on you for joining and everything.
Yeah, and as Greg said, Loeffler knew it too.
Oh yeah. Well, look, and the other thing too is like Noel is Noel, and we could talk about that at length. I mean, I think one person I would tell you who is a Warner Brothers person, not Ted, someone else who's talked about like how I talked to this guy. And he told me like he'd go out on the road and they'd have like an entire floor, of like 2 entire floors of hotels. And he's like, how much money that is? He's like, You can say it's for security. That's fine. Maybe it was like more secure, but he's like, you realize how much money those guys were burning through by doing that type of like instead of thinking like we can, whatever, economize or whatever. And I think I was just thinking of like Sammy takes credit, and maybe he does deserve credit for being like, why the hell do you guys have backdrops and lights? Just have an open stage where we could seat the extra, him and Loeffler, like the extra 20% of the arena. Supposedly that was a big income thing. But like, whatever it is, I mean, that Sammy likes to talk about how the money changed. And, I'm not in a position to argue with. I've never seen the statements of the band's billing, but that was something that a Warner Brothers person who was neutral about it was like, that whatever those guys were making on tour, they were spending a lot on the housing and the crew and just all that stuff, just the way they were moving the operation around the country by that level of like, we need this much to have our Van Halen experience for everybody.
I think it's like a learning process too. It's like, they started off and, Noel talked his way into like, hey, I can do better for you guys because you're being robbed blind. But, he still wasn't doing things as efficiently. And I think Ed probably had a much better business mind for that because, Noel Monk he was kind of this street guy, and he had these street smarts and everything like that. And, whereas I think Ed was much more business schooled, and he had much more of that mind, and he had more of that accountant's type of mind and everything, Whereas I think Noel was kind of just this kind of heavy bluster and intimidation and kind of thing. And I think he also enjoyed the perks, as much as anything as well,
I always got the vibe that they were very resentful that they didn't make the amount of money that they should have made. Eddie, Al, even in the later year, like, in the early 2000s when they hooked up with Irving Azoff, obviously he monetized everything, and they finally made more money from 2000, whatever, 7 to the end, more than they made the whole first part of their career.
Right.
And it's because of stuff like that. I know, like Eddie said that in the 1984 tour, we made nothing. We broke even because the production cost so much, the stage lighting.
But they said that on every single tour, and the Dave's line was, and Eddie, from the first world tour where they were headlining. That was the line, and I believe it. And to the detriment of Dave, I think Dave really did sink a lot of money into the Eat 'em and Smile tour production, because, man, that light show, the car lights alone, good God, that was more than Van Halen probably.
Yeah, no, it was crazy.
Broke every time, and that was their pattern. Not just the absurd hotel stuff, but just they'll say, well, it all went to the staging, and that's a legitimate thing,
Right. And also a lot of it went to catering,
Krell.
Well, I don't think that was the line item, but I think it was just under catering.
So Sammy
Catering.
around July 15th, Sammy auditions. And when did they really start in earnest working on the album after that? I know their father died in like November, but I always got the feeling that they didn't really start recording until around November for the album. But
I think it was a little bit earlier, actually. From what I could tell, it was about October. They finished up the Farm Aid thing. They kind of got to know each other. They did a little bit of pre-production and writing and everything like that. And from what my research suggests, which I'm trying to remember my sources and let's see if I can find here, but I think it started in about October. Let me just double check here.
Although I think that maybe even in that first rehearsal, Sammy did have probably might have had most of
Summer Nights or whatever. Was it Summer Nights?
Good enough, maybe, had a good scratch vocal,
Ed had stuff written already, and that's the thing. A lot of the stuff that, not a lot, but there's a couple songs that appeared on 5150 that were written when Dave was still in the band. Yeah. And Dave, kind of later kind of mocked it and everything like that and said it's whatever. And I think I don't want to sound bad about it, but, Ed wasn't crazily prolific. He was prolific, but he wasn't insanely prolific. He wasn't just writing a song a week or anything like that. And he had ideas and he let them ferment for a while, as we well know. Even up until Balance, he was bringing up ideas from the early days.
And only cut what they needed for the album, right? They never overcut really, right?
No. They would overcut, but not a whole lot. Yeah, but basically it was like they got whatever they needed, and Ed would have these ideas, and he would they would ferment, and he'd build with them for a while and everything like that. And with Dave, they were working on things. There was the New Toy scenario. Ed gets the Steinberger, in New Orleans at AM show 1985. Ned Steinberger gives them this GL2T. With the trans trim on it, and it's like, oh, this is really cool, and he goes off, and he writes these songs, and, but I think, Sammy sings, Summer Nights and My Radio and whatever, and Ed loves it, and I think they had to still work things out a little bit, but October, I think, was pre-production, basically. They got the, because what they did, September 22nd was Farm Aid, and they come back, and then I think they said, okay, well, now we need to really do this album, so they work on songwriting and everything, and they got to know each other, and they got to have the bromance start and everything. And October, and I think you're right, I think it probably was November actually when they actually started cutting to tape.
And when did Mick Jones come on board, and how did that all come about? Because I know Don wasn't very happy about that.
There's the Foreigner tour ends, and that's sort of, I can't remember that date off the top of my head, but if that's obviously easily Googleable if someone's interested to go back, and he came up after that tour ended.
And that was the Agent Provocateur tour right after I Want to Know What Love Is.
Right. He did. So they did. And you can see that whatever the last date was, he talks about that after I finished that. Obviously, I finished that tour. Then I was available to be able to go produce. No, I mean, I don't. I think I've never dug deep with Don about that. But I think it's pretty clear that he was a little bit uncomfortable with that idea at first, with the having a, but because for what it was worth. I mean, you go from being like, we're going to do a solo album together. I'm going to produce your solo album. So now it's like, there's Sammy presumably was interested in having an outside ear come in and work with them. So
yeah. The Foreigner tour, I just looked it up, in November 30th.
Right. So that's when Mick, at least that's when Mick was available to come up.
Yeah, I think Mick showed up a little bit later. I think he showed up either late December or early January, from what I could tell about the whole process. I mean, Don would probably know a lot better, obviously, than I would, because I wasn't there. But from what I could tell, it was about, I mean, from what I get the impression from what, from the Ed interviews that he did, it was that, he came in kind of late to the process, and he really just did a little bit of arrangement stuff,
right?
And everything. And Don and Ed had pretty much completed things, and it was just really him suggesting, especially on the more pop ballady type of stuff like Dreams and stuff like that. That,
yeah, I understand it was. I mean, the way Ed says it was that it was basically a Warner's contractual obligation that they had to have somebody of their choosing. If it wasn't going to be Ted, they had to have somebody from that was of their choosing that would come in and do something. And as far as I can tell, to the only thing that I can confirm that Mick Jones did was to help work on Dreams.
Yeah, the arrangement, right? I think the verse was originally a chorus. Or something like that.
But also, and Sammy says this, and I believe him, because to Sammy's eternal credit, and we can talk about this later, but Dreams to me is one of the greatest rock vocals I've ever heard in my life, and it's superior. I mean, the singing on that is a once in a lifetime thing that probably Sammy would. Well, I know for a fact that Sammy never sang it like that ever again. No. That was a lightning in a bottle, studio magic moment, and I think as far as I can tell, Jones coached Sammy
to I agree with that.
Try those higher notes and go up here and try this melody way up there. Yeah. And as Mike recently talked about, Mike said, even I, with my range, I had to go from being here to being woo. I mean, that's something else,
Yeah. There was no hard feelings. I know Don and him in the end, they had mutual respect for each other, and they thought it was great. And obviously, Ed, I don't think liked having Mick Jones. He was like, it was us basically. He kind of, But even that, when Billy Joel asked Eddie to produce Stormfront, I guess they had in a Greenwich Village, they had a dinner together, Billy Joel and Eddie, in 1987 or 88. And Ed couldn't do it because they were OU 812 and the Monsters of Rock thing. And apparently Ed was the one who told Billy Joel, you should get Mick Jones, which he did. And Mick Jones produced Billy Joel's that huge was Stormfront, I guess. It was huge, that album. So that was the first Billy Joel album that didn't have I forget his producer that he had for all the other years.
Oh yeah.
Went a different direction, but apparently that became about because Eddie turned him down and said no, but you should get Mick Jones, and Billy Joel did.
Yeah, Ed was very diplomatic. I mean, that's the thing. It's like it was always like in the aftermath where the shit came out. But when the record was new and fresh, he always, he towed the line. Yeah. And said the good stuff and gave the praise to everybody involved. And he was the team player all the way.
Diver Down, perfect example, right?
Right.
Diver Down, perfect example. And everything. And it wasn't until really much later that he started to kind of rag on that record a bit. Right. But yeah, he knew, where he knew where the bacon came from, basically, from which end of the pig. So he was really good about that. But I think the Mick thing is a very interesting thing because it really is, he got this credit, but it really was kind of this, he was in at this very end of it, and then the album was now much. Obviously, we're talking now in March, on the anniversary here. It basically he came in for a few weeks, and everything, did a few nips and tucks here and there, and obviously, played a major role in Dreams, which he deserves credit for. But but
I'm always wondering how many points he got on the record. Inside baseball, but I'm sure he earned quite a bit of money from that record.
Yeah, I bet. He was there enough to. I was looking for really obscure Don Landy interviews and stuff. Just by looking up Don Landy and going to the 65th page on Google, and I found an interview with Mick in, I don't remember what year, but on this website called World Radio History, and he was there enough to know that Alex's drums were feeding Alex's electronic drums through a speaker while recording in the room, which seems kind of counterproductive, but he said like, something about the bleed of Alex's Simmons drums, and the interviewer was like, bleed on the electronic drums, and he's like, yeah, you'd be surprised.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
So I got the impression also that obviously if they started like in November, that they finished, the tour was booked. The album came out 3 days before the tour started. So there was really no, the 27th of March, the tour kicked off in like Shreveport.
Right.
The album came out the 24th. I get the feeling that the album wasn't finished and mixed and mastered and, printed and boxed much earlier before that, like end of February, or early March. I feel like there wasn't even enough time for Warner Brothers. They didn't have time. They said they didn't shoot a video on purpose because or whatever, but I just didn't think they had any time for that.
No,
for
right.
any of that, right?
It was
Right,
probably
yeah.
promotion too. There's no time to promote, do really interviews, except for unless they wanted to surprise everybody, just hit the road with it.
I think they wanted to get it out, I guess, quick. But
Yeah.
Warner
Well,
Brothers.
and again, it's probably not much shorter than any other Van Halen record, but like even something like The Inside, which I did the interview with Don for Tape Op Magazine, and he told me that Leffler's like, it's a rap song. We need a rap song on the record. And John was like, what are you talking about? Like Leffler thought it was like a Run DMC thing, kind of like, not like exactly, but like literally that's what he was like. It's a rap song. It's like, we do not need a rap song on a Van Halen record. But Leffler like was insistent that they needed to put that on the record. He thought it was gonna be like a novelty thing or something. I swear. I mean, go back to what Don said.
Too many years with the Carpenters for Ed.
It's
Leffler.
as I mentioned, it's like it's one of the most. It is the most dated Van Halen song out of their entire catalog.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Don hated it.
It has.
Don's like, I hate it.
It has those Fairlight, preset orchestral hits that were like on everything. And
on a musical level and on a lyrical level, to me personally, it is the single worst Van Halen song in the entire catalog. And this is from a guy who loves Van Halen from 1977 to 1989, and I don't listen to anything after that. I still say that Inside is worse than anything that came
That's
from
funny.
1990 onward.
Right.
No, it's a real anomaly.
Up for breakfast. How many AI?
I'll take that one versus Inside anyway. I mean, no, don't put no mojo on my butt anyway.
Yeah.
Well,
really?
the other thing that came up in that conversation is Don did say, like, I can't remember how many mics. So he told, like, I think it may be in the Tape Op interview, like 2 or 3 microphones he had out on the guys like talking. He's like, if you solo those microphones and like if actually like whatever is on the master tape and like listening, he'd be like, it'd be hilarious. Actually, it's like he's like just incredibly funny stuff. And they edited, there's stuff that was obviously edited out, but he's like, have you ever heard that stuff? Like I said, you should put it out as a bonus track, or they should put it out. And of course, they never, of course, bonus.
Tanner,
track.
there's a
not go there.
task for you.
But,
Tanner put
but
the
there you
AI
go.
on that.
But yeah, you could, right? You could, but he basically said there was like obviously much more material that was like probably on the tapes, on the multi-track master still. He said you would be like, it'd be on the floor with how funny the stuff was.
Yeah.
So maybe that would be the way to rescue that song from into a comedy album or something like that. But he said it was, pretty funny. But yes, a rap song, and it was a pain in the ass to do. It took a long time to do that song too.
So that's my only criticism of that album is I just feel like it was too short. I just wanted like one more rocker, one more song. You know what I mean? I always was like, but I felt that way on a lot of Van Halen albums. Even on Fair Warning, after the second side, it's just like, just give me one more song.
Yeah, if Sammy could have gotten a hook into "I Want Some Action," it would have been a much better record. But again, it's time. They probably had the tour booked before the album was even finished. That's typical.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it is what it is, but God, it hurts.
What do you guys think about the, Tanner, maybe this is for you, like the electronic drums? Like, I mean, that's, it's sort of the Don Landy era has sort of had, there's kind of a mixed, I think, opinion about some of the, especially electronic drums, which presumably Alex's desire, like that's what he wanted. But what's your thoughts on that versus 1984?
I think a big part of it was necessity in that small room. Like I said, there was a lot of bleed, and you could hear it in the Guitar Hero tracks. Like the Guitar Hero tracks are separated out like kick, snare, toms, and cymbals, and you can really hear in the toms track like how much cymbal was coming into those rototoms on 1984 in that small room, which ultimately, proximity-wise, wasn't too different than Sunset. Regardless, like when you have electronic drums, you just plug them into the board, and there's no bleed at all. And I think he fought to make them sound a little bit more natural than Def Leppard or anyone else that was trying to
Right.
do that same kind of thing. I was thinking about it earlier actually, and how it is so dated, and I think we've talked about it a million times, like how dated those sounds are, but they're very, very memorable and very audible. That's like something I was thinking about, is how you think back to the first 4 albums and how Alex's toms aren't very audible, and his kick especially not very and he's just said it in an interview a few weeks ago with that on that Brazil channel or whatever, that he just said I didn't care about my kick drum for several, he didn't care at all. I think honestly until Andy Johns came in, and that's very evident in the Roth era. But I don't know, it's very audible to me. And when I've been doing these 5150 covers with John and Connor that recently with the I Want Some Action, it's a very audible drum sound. Everything is very clear, and of course the cymbals are as bright as they can be on that album as well. But
right.
The album's interesting because it's such a sonic shift overall, though. It's not just Alex's drums, but it's also Ed's guitar is actually much more mid-range focused. It's not this big, expansive, wide thing that dominates almost the entire mix, And you can actually hear more of Mike's bass, and you can actually hear more of Alex's drums and everything, and it's very interesting because it's quite a seismic shift from 1984.
But you know what? 1984. I was on the way home tonight because I knew we were doing this. I was listening to, and I was focusing on the drums and the fidelity. It's just 1984. The drums, for some reason, they're more upfront. They're more ambient. And I know, obviously, it's more than just the Simmons toms that are making it. It's just, I don't know, the mix or something like that. It's just 1984. It just breathed, that album, and the fidelity on the drums. And it sounds squashed on 5150, the drums, to me. I mean,
I think it was a very 80s production on 5150 though too. I think that was the thing. There was a big shift in how a record should sound and everything.
That's a good point.
And I think the other mistake is that maybe they weren't looking in the gutter a little bit more, and at the Metallicas and the Slayers and these other bands that were coming up and saying we're taking over, fuck you, and we saw that at the Monsters of Rock with the fucking, San Francisco and LA with the riots before Metallica coming on. That was a changing of the guard.
Yeah, right.
Well, Chris, you brought up the Steinberger, and as Tanner and I, we're always talking, and Johnny, we're always talking about the guitars, and Donnie as well. Shout out to Donnie Ward. But, it's the Steinberger that is the main guitar on the entire album. And I didn't even realize, probably because I was shutting it out of my headspace, but our friend in Japan, Mitsuya Sasagawa, he figured out that the Steinberger is what's on Inside.
Well, we know that, yeah.
That was and then so it's on virtually, so it's on Get Up, it's on Summer Nights, it's on Inside, and then later on it's also the lead guitar on Cabo Wabo. Really.
I don't believe that. I still think that's the Kramer 5150 on Cabo Wabo.
Well, like I said, it's got 24 frets on the Steinberger. You can't do that on the Kramer. Period.
But you can. There's a guy on YouTube. I gotta send you the clip that he's doing that. He's going from the 12th fret up to the 22nd, and he's going into the bend to get that octave.
You can bend it, but there's no bend on the record, and I'll show you. I'll transcribe that part and I'll show it to you.
Transcription
But
also that also doesn't account for the pull up on the bar. So that's how we know.
It's not really
Summer Nights.
I don't know. Listen to that.
You can't pull up. You can't pull up on the Kramer 5150 or any other guitar. It's only the Steinberger you can pull up.
I don't. You can barely hear any pull up.
No, well, that's the thing.
Ellen, you and I will fight. We'll fight tomorrow about this. All right.
Oh, well, I've already won. So right. I'll send you the clips, and I'll make a clip.
I will say this: we know that Ed definitely used the Steinberger a lot on 5150, but the Kramer 5150 is there a lot too. And the Flying V's there. you know, and there's a Stratocaster there, and there's a Kramer Farrington, you know, electric acoustic.
Acoustic in it, right?
You know,
Well, that was the ironic thing, though, because the Steinberger is so present, and you know, the 1984 Kramer is the guitar on Good Enough. That has a completely different kind of thing going on because of that low A string, but it's a different pickup than what was going on in the Kramer 5150. And you know, I'm really at this point struggling to figure out exact where I can define that the 5150 Kramer was even used on that record. So to me, I believe that it was used on the overdub solo on the 5150 title track, and then the main guitar track on 5150 is the Flying V.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
So but that is really kind of and then I'm not 100% sure what guitar, and we were talking about this earlier, but Dreams, that has a different tuning, and I'm trying to figure out, you know, whether he actually used that guitar on Dreams, but no other, and then probably the solo on Best of Both Worlds is the 5150 Kramer. So that's like maybe 3 overdubs, not even the main guitar, right?
I think Why Can't This Be Love? I do think that's the Kramer 51.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and I left that out because
Ed
Johnny, you
said back in
changed
the
my
day.
mind on that. You managed to track that so well, and you nailed the sound of that. That I believe it is the.
That's because
5150
because of you, because we went out of our way to make it.
Ed did say back,
Carter's not going to buy this.
You nailed it.
All right,
You
all right.
nailed it. Yeah.
So I have a related but unrelated question. So you gotta we could go around the horn on this one. Did Ed know that Best of Both Worlds sounds like Celebration? Yes or no?
No, I think that's completely what do you call it, psychosomatic or whatever. I think you absorb stuff.
Yeah, no, I don't mean like before. Like when did they like at some point? Like they must have been like, oh, it does sort of sound like Celebration. There's no way they did. I don't mean like he's like I'm copying Celebration. I just think like it's interesting. It's like I don't know. It's just one of those things that's like, it for me. Like Ed was such a great craftsman in how he would like borrow and take and basically use influences to like take things and sort of twist it to his own way, where you would not initially know like, oh, this is the source of this.
No,
but like to that, it was like, but you hear, I mean, yeah, but you hear that it's sort of like fairly.
Yeah, I think Ed would just, knowing Ed, he would have just brushed it off and like, fuck it, you know, whatever.
Well, if you read
nobody cared, right? Nobody cared, but I'm just saying it's interesting.
Yeah,
it's
there's
interesting.
a quote, and you guys have probably read it, but there's a specific quote in Rosen's book where he discusses that with him, and Ed is like, "This sounds like something. Do you know what this is?" and so Rosen rightly says, "Well, it kind of sounds like AC/DC, right?" And then Ed says, "Well, it's those kind of chords," which is true,
right?
But I think Ed did know it wasn't from him, and that it was either something that it was in his consciousness, but he couldn't put a name to it. So no, I don't think that Ed had a clue that it was Celebration.
That's interesting, right? Yeah, it's interesting.
Every one of the greatest songwriters rips off from everyone.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Jim Valance, Brian Adams' guy, Jim Valance, he told me everybody, we all do it. We listen to something, we try to cop the feel of that, everything like that. Eddie did it. He was into Peter Gabriel. So I still think the riff for Spanked is the bass line made into a more darker. But if you listen to that and Sledgehammer next to each other, it's very similar, but just like a more minor key, darker.
No, definitely.
That album, you know, it's like, I don't know.
I've worked with numerous. There's a guy, you know, the guy who was the lead singer in my band in high school, and we worked together in the '80s on stuff later on. And I could always tell what concert he went to see by what the songs he wrote sounded like. Right. There was like Cheap Trick. There was like I Can't Take It No More, you know, and that Todd Rundgren produced, you know, Next Position Please or whatever. And he wrote a song that was just like that. And we had just seen Cheap Trick like 2 months before, you know, and then he goes to see Hall & Oates, and then he does a song and it's just completely Hall & Oates, you know, and people do that. They just, that's how it is. I mean, you know,
what you eat. You are what you eat, right?
You know, Tchaikovsky riffing off, you know, peasant folk songs and stuff like that, you know.
But I don't think it was a purposeful thing on it.
No, I wasn't suggesting it was. I was just sort of like, at some point, like someone had to be like, that sounds a lot like Celebration. And you'd be like, oh shit, yeah, it kind of does, right? Like, I don't.
And then the irony of having the latter-day version of Kool and the Gang opening on the final tour.
Exactly.
That was probably Dave's.
You stole my punchline, Al.
That was Dave's FU.
Yeah.
that era. You know, that was his subtle little thing. It's like, oh yeah,
Exactly.
best of both worlds sounds like Celebrate. Hey, we're bringing Cool in the Gang.
What
out.
are they doing?
Yeah.
Are they doing
Exactly.
doing Hagar era stuff? Who's opening for us?
Yeah, that's great, man.
But I've done it myself. I mean,
Sure.
I you know, when I was doing a bunch of club stuff in the early 2000s, I used to go get tripping out my head on E, you know, and go out to clubs and stuff. And then I was in the studio working, and I like, oh, this bass line's really fucking cool, you know, I did this thing. And then I listened to him go like, oh fuck, it's like this song. You know why? You know, it sounds exactly like it. I'm like, oh shit. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was. You know, I hadn't thought about the AC/DC thing even. I had forgotten about that. If I had read that in the Rosen book, I'd completely forgotten that. But that's interesting too to think about that riff as like an AC/DC influenced riff. You know.
Very much. I mean, and what he's doing is like a lot of times he plays the D with the F sharp on the bottom in the bass, that one, and then just your basic cowboy chords. Otherwise,
Highway to Hell.
The Highway to Hell D chord, right?
Yeah.
I really do think.
Every
I really do
AC/DC
think
song,
like
period, has those same chords in it, and
Yeah,
that one,
yeah.
that one right there is just that's the AC/DC chord, probably in my opinion, because
Yeah,
everything
you're right.
else is just the cowboy chords. But that F sharp on the bottom with the D is the go-to, you know.
Oh no,
You
definitely.
cannot listen to Ed's favorite, Down Payment Blues, and then not hear Sucker in a three-piece. It's
Right.
Oh yeah.
the way it modulates. you
Well,
know.
I think Sammy's involvement in the band, like I think it really did open up like, you know, a spark in Ed's brain where, oh, I can make those AC/DC songs now because I have a guy that can sing like Bon
interesting.
Scott, you know.
Well, he was
can
already
sing
doing that
them.
in 1984 though. There's already there's two AC/DC songs in 1984, and Ed admits it, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was
Stand 'Em
already
On, Drop Dead Legs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like
It's
But
true.
I'm Tanner, I'm glad that you said that because I wanted to I want to give all the props to Sammy as possible because Sammy really truly did go to places that he never went before
Right.
musically. I mean, and that bit about Mick Jones and Dreams again, and one of my favorite vocals I've ever heard, amazing. And every track is Sammy ingratiating himself with the band. He wants to make this work. He's not only a team player, but he's trying to go above and beyond what he ever even thought he could do, and he succeeded wildly on this album, in my opinion.
it was great for him creatively.
Yes.
Listen to his solo albums, especially, you know, I mean, I love the very early period, just post Montrose stuff, you know, and the All Night Long live album is a great record, you know, great live record from the 70s. But man, once he hits 1980, you know, he puts out these records, but it's like, boy, the quotient of prime meat, you know, starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller. You know, and like he had One Way to Rock, you know, and he had I Can't Drive 55. But man, you listen to the rest of those records.
Yeah,
it's
and the best, like even I've Done Everything for You, the Rick Springfield song, you know, great song. But I mean, man, he really completely left that kind of stuff behind for 5150 at least, and you know, it's just I'm so still amazed and thrilled to listen to that album because it made a case. Like that album is kind of undeniable from a quality perspective. You may not like Sammy, but man, the singing and the lyrics, the melodies, and 5150, the title track alone is a miracle of a singer coming up with vocal melodies and parts that fit that bizarre prog rock.
Right.
song.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
it's crazy.
Right.
Well,
You know, go ahead.
Oh, it's just a fun game to play. Is like, what would Dave do with this material?
Right.
You know, when you listen to it and you try and think, what would he do? You know, and there's a few songs that would work. You know, but obviously, like Dreams would never have happened with Dave.
I think bits of Dreams may have been something that Dave had heard, and I think probably 5150. He probably heard that and was like, oh, forget that. I mean, you know, that Dave will never, to his, you know, I love Dave, you know that, but man, I don't think Dave could have ever done anything with that music on.
Right.
The track sheets that were in circulation online, where it was like getting towards the end of 83, and they were like writing down the track list of what they kind of assumed, and most of them had no lyric, you know, no legitimate titles yet. There was a 5150 written on that, on those lists. So, you know, whether or not that was
shuffle
an early an early incarnation. Who knows? But
I don't think so. This is the point. I mean, I don't want to go into 1984, but people say like, oh, Ripley was the song that we know as Ripley from The Wildlife, and then became
Blood and Fire.
And Fire.
Yeah, on Different Kind of Truth. I think Ripley was actually Top Jimmy. I'm hoping that
Oh, on those sheets, yeah.
Yeah, on those sheets. I'm thinking it's just a title that stuck with that because he used the Ripley guitar.
I think you're right. I think
and I really, because I don't know. I mean, I'm really curious to find out if there's anybody who can remember what those songs referred to on that memo.
Right.
But but
I sent them to Ted. Right. I sent them to Ted and I showed them to Don, and like neither of them could remember. Like they couldn't remember like baritone slide, and Don was like, I don't, baritone guitar. He's like, probably. He's like, but I don't, like probably, but I don't remember. I don't remember.
Yeah.
They just don't.
Yeah, that's the one where all you guys, I talked to all of you guys about that, probably about the baritone slide, because that was the whole thing when Chris and we recognized he saw the Valet Citron bass guitar. That was really, I was thinking that could have been it, but that could have even been good enough for all I know. I mean, who knows?
Who knows? And it did bring stuff over though too. So that's the other thing. And with 5150 being the direct follow-up, they could have been at some of those song titles, those material could have been now. Now Sammy tries to say that, 5150 was my thing, that I came up with the title 5150, and it's possible he did, and Ed was just like, yeah, cool,
Right.
It's just, I think that's just, it's just, the song things in the Templeman memo were just
right. Right.
And I think Ripley could have been a placeholder for any number of songs, not just, it could have been Top Jimmy, and it could have been the Wildlife thing that, it became Blood and Fire and whatever.
And lyrically, there is no chorus in 5150. So there's a musical chorus, but not a lyrical chorus. So it's like there's not a repeated refrain phrase in the whole song.
Right. I mean, I think the analogy
that makes sense.
The analogy here is maybe like is the song Red Zone. Like I know it goes under a lot of titles, but like I talked to Ted about that, and I was like, I played that for him, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. He goes, yeah, it's cool. And I said, what happened? He said, Dave couldn't we couldn't get a handle on a lyric and a melody. And I was like, well, you could have put it on the album as an instrumental. And he kind of looked at me. He's like, you can't put a 4-minute instrumental on a Van Halen record. Like, he didn't say dummy, but he basically looked at me like, kid, you can't put like a 4-minute instrumental on the back of the record and be like, yeah, that's gonna work. Like nobody's gonna like tolerate that when they're driving their Trans Am like you're 17. Like So he was just like. It just didn't come together, right? So it was a cool thing, and we finished it, and but there was he couldn't take it to the next. We've talked about this with Dancing in the Streets and all that stuff. The same thing, where it's like there was nothing. It was progress was stopped. I'll wait. Progress was stopped, right? And then it was sort of like you needed something to kick it going. So it could have been that maybe Dave would have heard it, and nothing would have happened with it, right? It just would have been shelved.
Right.
Yeah. It's that song. I mean, not to get off too far off the 5150 album, but I can see Dave just going like, "What the fuck am I going to do with this?" Because it's really a progressive rock kind of thing. It kind of lurches and goes off in these weird kind of it just the melodically it's odd, and everything. It's cool, but it's just like it ain't David Lee Roth,
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, to bring it into more perspective, like even consider Eat 'Em and Smile, like. Dave reluctantly adopted keyboards, and of course you got the Skyscraper, and then it becomes a little bit more full blown. But even so, it's like it's the 80s. Synthesizers are cheap. Everyone's using them. They're all over the place. And Dave still wants to rock like it's the 70s, basically. And it's fun. He realizes like I better get with the times, And even Dave, as much as he loves the soul and the disco and everything like that. Should have realized, hey, keyboards, why not?
Right.
But
ironically, because Ed really, to a great degree, put that in the hard rock canon, or even just the pop rock guitar-driven band with synths. And Greg says that in VH Rising. So really, in there's a case to be made that obviously ZZ Top, Eliminator, and these other things that came right on the heels of that. I think was influenced by the success of Jump, and that trailed off into the next album. And I'm just going to jump in and say, I bought the introductory single of Why Can't This Be Love at 45 right
Me too.
album came out. Okay, and then
Get Up B-side.
Get Up is the B-side indeed, and it says, and there's Get Up, and Why Can't This Be Love? And I did the same thing with OU812 when the Black and Blue single 45 came out short, maybe a week or a couple weeks before the actual LP dropped. And, and then I got the actual album, on the day that it came out. And, I'm like, I was like, I don't know, maybe my brain didn't go there back then, but I didn't get any sort of gay stuff out of this. I was just like, oh, it's a rock and roll.
You were too young, Alan. You were too young. You didn't live by West Hollywood like I did. So
yeah. No, I was like totally not getting it.
You didn't like have to go to Fatburger on Santa Monica Boulevard at 1 in the morning. So
not at 1 in the morning, but I lived in Santa Monica from 1983 to 1984. I went to that Fatburger and I loved that Fatburger. Loved it, and we were broke, and we were like on welfare, but we got some Fat Burger, man.
You got to get the Fat Burger. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I could walk there from my apartment actually, and but anyway, back to 5150. I love Fat Burger, but I mean, yeah. Oh God, this album, I put it on, and it really, that overall tone, Chris, that you were talking about, so much more forward.
Yeah.
Even than 1984, there's not the plate reverb and it was plate reverb, the EMT that was on 1984.
Yeah.
And that's not really present. It's just the guitars are boom right in there. This is the first time that we have the fully produced wet, dry, wet sound happening in your headspace here in the mix. That's down to Don. Don has described that part in other interviews. I don't know how much. I don't remember if he talked about it in Tape-Op, but
was that wet dry wet or was it wet dry? I thought like
it's just wet dry.
Was dry in one, and then that harmonizer was only in the other speaker. I think that's
Bradshaw tried to get Ed on wet dry wet at that period, and he
for the live sound. But Don did something. Greg, if you remember anything that Don said about it, there is an interview out there where Don describes how he did it in the studio, and so it's different.
I don't think I asked him that specific of a question about, but he did it. He did an interview about 10 years ago that was on. I don't know if it's still up anymore, but it was on a blog. It wasn't quite, again, it may not have been as deep of a dive into that type of stuff, but it was one of the only interviews he had done, I think, earlier on, like 10 or 15 years ago. But yeah, you guys got to decipher it. That's your job. You're the archaeologist. You don't need Don. Don't let Don remember. You guys figure it out.
Right.
Essentially a doubling effect. I mean, it's a doubling effect. It's a delayed and detuned signal on the right, and most likely just mostly dry on the left. And it eventually would turn into the wet, dry, wet. I think later on. I think obviously, I think Black and Blue or one of those tracks on OU812 was the first time he put his live rack on recording. But before that, it was basically Marshall mic'd up, nothing, whatever you wanted before, Echoplex or whatever.
Yeah.
But everything was a post-production effect that was applied either later or tracked with it. I'm sure Don would track stuff with it because Ed just knew, and they had done so much experimentation just sitting in the studio that he knew that he wanted that kind of stuff. So
I could be wrong, but I thought that the first wet, dry, wet with the speakers in the studio and the rack was not until For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, but maybe I'm
wrong. Believe so. Yeah.
I know this is a PG-13 channel, but you guys are going from like all the gay talk to the wet, dry, wet stuff. I'm not really sure. Like, we want to continue on this. Like,
this is actually
I don't want to get this channel flagged or
Well, as long as you don't try to put no mojo on my butt, anyway.
But
yeah, he had the rack in the studio. He might have rehearsed it. He always recorded with that rack in the studio. Now he might have recorded his guitar dry and then added the effects onto the mix. So
yeah, it was still.
Well, that was the thing. He was still all the way through OU812. He was still doing the Echoplex was still part of the chain. So the core sound was still the guitar Echoplex amp, number one amp. still the #1 Marshall at that point. And I think Tanner's right. I think it was all still, and from what I remember from the one interview with Don where he did discuss how he did the eventide balancing on 5150 specifically. It was all done in the post-production headspace,
Right.
not the actual.
Well, all the eventide, that's all post.
Yeah.
We're going to record with that.
Yeah. But and then for unlawful carnal knowledge, that's where I think it was the whole full live rig. And that was an interesting thing. They did use eventide going back to the first album. It's on every album in small doses. And then by fair warning was when it really came into the picture fully as a part of the main part of the overall sound on almost everything. But
on Diver Down, it's not really there. I think it probably is somewhere, but maybe Amigo didn't have one in their rack at the time or wherever they recorded Diver Down.
We talked about that. So at Amigo, I don't think that they actually had an eventide, and it was hard for me. I found a picture, or somebody may have been Tanner.
I found it.
I found that picture of Don Dokken in the studio doing Tooth and Nail or something like that.
Yeah.
And you can see the eventide there, but that was about 2 years later, I think, right?
I found the one. It was those magazines where they just list every studio in California, basically, and it would list everything that they had. I think we had a group chat on Facebook or something where it said like Amigo had it. But yeah, I mean, Women and Children First and Diver Down definitely kind of a weird kind of two dips and no eventide kind of eras.
I think there was some. I think and this is micro use. I think there might have been some eventide on some of the cleaner sounds on Women and Children First, just like super briefly, like maybe in a simple rhyme. Might have been something on the vocals here and there. It's little, but I think it's there. And then of course on the first, and we're dialing back a little bit, but the eventide is such a major part of 5150 that it has to be mentioned. I mean,
it's a big part of Ed's tone. I mean, you can't get Ed's tone on that, unless you have an eventide, basically.
Yeah. So. You can't get it on 1984. It's 1984. You got to have the eventide, but it's so dialed back.
It's the first time it's in true stereo and not just throw the guitar here and reverb the other side, but. I mean, Drop Dead Legs is the true first time, and I think this is obviously a culmination of that experimentation on that.
Well, it comes to dominate his tone on 5150. Basically, it's just it's a dominant force.
Yeah, the vintage strat on Best of Both Worlds is a traditional use of the sort of the chorusy sound, and then the compression. Possible. I think there may have been a direct track on. Well, there's according to Greg, I don't know if you got this into the weeds with Don, but Dweezil told me that starting with Fair Warning, Don kept a dry direct track for all the guitars on everything from Fair Warning onwards, and he would either dial it in sometimes or not. So it just because Don kept a direct track doesn't necessarily mean he ever used it on.
Yeah, it's a safety measure that became a much more predominant production practice in around that period, and that's when reamping and all that stuff started to happen. And it was much more complicated process to do back then. But you do see that happening, especially by the late 80s. Reamping becomes like a big thing. Like Joe Satriani talks about reamping a lot on Surfing with the Alien, for example.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that Don was
did not do in the studio. The reamping thing and like the load box and all that kind of stuff started happening in the live rig, in '86. So there was also some different things happening in the live rig because you had other people working on stuff. And Edward got an actual guitar technician because, with all due respect to Rudy and Greg, I know you're really super familiar with the one Rudy interview that Rosen did. It's the only interview that Rudy ever did,
right?
To my knowledge. So Rudy was the guy that, he basically did a lot on the kind of strange monitoring system that he set up for Edward. That was like a constant thing that he was tweaking was the monitoring system, which involved the extra Marshall heads and extra cabs for, Al to monitor Ed and, all this kind of crazy thing. And it got to be really convoluted on the '84 tour But Rudy didn't really hardly touch Edward's guitars. He didn't tune the guitars. Edward personally tuned all the guitars through the 1984 tour. And there weren't that many guitar changes at that time. But then when you go to the 86 tour, when he gets a guy who really did know what he was doing and does know what he was doing, which is Zeke Clark, who ironically may have been booted because he was like selling pigs. But I mean, that's scuttlebutt. I'll drop that there. But I mean, but Zeke is an incredibly skilled guy, and he got what was going on. And Zeke was actually tuning guitars. Ed was, I think, still tuning the 5150 Kramer, which is still the main guitar on the tour. So there's a shift in like more competent personnel, and you got, and I'll kind of go ahead.
Real quick. I was just going to say, you guys, I can't really speak to the technical stuff on this, but I remember Don helped Ed come up with something that they used at Us Festival with power amps, right? That was like a big, I know Don has talked about that was a big breakthrough. Like Ed was super happy when whatever that, you tell me what it is, but like was something he was like, this was like, oh my gosh, why didn't we think of this sooner kind of thing? Why did we do this? Why didn't we do this sooner?
I believe that Rudy and Don worked together on that, is my understanding. So that, but it's really wacky, and no one would ever do that these days.
Yeah. The going process, I think it was like, though, at that point in 85, 86, there was this kind of chicken or the egg thing where it was basically, did the live process affect the studio? Did the studio affect the live thing? I think a lot of guitarists were really, this is why we saw this proliferation of huge racks, and especially Lukather and all this other stuff, that they wanted their studio sound on stage. And that's why Bob Bradshaw became such a big deal. And everything, right. And that was just, I was in Hollywood. That was the mentality. It was just like studio sound on stage, and everybody was just carrying around absurdly huge rigs, and it was less about these outdated Marshalls and everything. And if there was a Marshall out there, everyone was hacking them up anyways and modifying them, and they were putting, load boxes. I put a load box on my fucking Hiwatt, that's because that was the thing to do, effect, it goes on and on with the kind of stuff that we were all pushing the envelope, and it was all to get this goal of like studio sound on stage.
Hey, Richie,
you're going to be off the ball. Learning to lead.
What's going on, guys? Can you hear me?
For everybody else.
So guys, this is Reggie Wu of Heaven's Edge.
What's up, buddy?
What's going on, everybody?
How you doing?
No talk.
So
I see the famous Les Paul right there.
Yeah.
And the man, Greg.
I'm gonna brag on Reggie. Not only did Reggie do his album on Columbia with his band, but also Reggie was the finalist, the second runner-up for the Cinderella guitar gig out of Philadelphia. So Reggie is the great dude and huge Van Halen guy, and
big Van Halen guy.
Cool.
Nice.
This is awesome. So you guys all talking about amps and stuff?
Oh, yeah. 5150, the 40th anniversary of the album, and all the stuff on that album, all the instruments, all the backstories of how that all came about.
Wow.
Everything 5150 album tonight. Yeah.
And how Patty Smythe pulled the plug for me.
Players get used.
So I wanted to bring up another thing. So we're talking about the instruments and stuff like that. My theory is like the song Dreams. I believe that Ed played the piano to they tracked everything live, we know always, but I think Ed played to a click track for Dreams, and Alex overdubbed on that one because the piano was in the same room as the drum. Well, maybe he did because of Simmons. Maybe they did track it together in the same room. I shouldn't say that, but I know Love Walks In, Ed played by himself and not with Alex at all, without a click track, because there's something in the chorus. It's like in classical music, it's called a ritardando, where it's like to put the tempo down. And if you notice that Love Walks In, when the chorus comes in, it slows down slightly to emphasize it. So they wouldn't be able to do that with a click track. So Ed played it by himself, tapping his foot as he played the whole thing. And Alex actually overdubbed the drums, and Eddie's timing was so good on Love Walks In that Alex was able to overdub that. That's no click track, but you'll notice during the choruses it slows down slightly because to add emphasis to the chorus. So that was, I thought, a pretty cool thing.
That is awesome.
to get on there. And but everything else, I guess, was tracked live. We all know that on the piano, he had the hammers shellacked on the Steinway to make them more percussive. And if you listen to if you go on Logic and you pull up a classical grand piano, they don't sound anything like that. Those lacquered, the hammers are so hard.
Yeah.
And percussive, and you hit isolated tracks on those stuff. You can really hear the difference.
I think you're absolutely right on that, and I'm glad you talked about the retardando or whatever. Yeah. That was like the purposeful. Another word for that is swing. You could say where you're purposely, ebbing and flowing in time. Although I tend to, as someone that like really sort of has to observe that stuff with the transcription work that I do all the time, is that really it's like, Edward's time was, to me, had a lot of soul, but it wasn't good.
Well, which is amazing for him to be able to go through that whole thing, because I remember he said that at the time he did that. He goes, I played it by myself, just tapping my foot, and Alex played to him. I'm sure a lot of that, like you said, he might not have great timing, but Alex was so used to it. It was almost like two people, one brain.
And that's the thing. And guys, we always talk about that. We talk about that. It is the symbiosis of Alex and Edward. And the thing is, like, the way I've kind of quantified that is that Alex had great time. Alex was always actually the one that was telling Edward he was coaching Edward on everything. I've talked to all of you, even just the story about Spanish Fly, about how it was Al in the studio going like, no, you're going too fast. Try it again, keep going. And the 26 takes that Dweezil had told me about that he listened to of Spanish Fly, and then before the take was take 25, and then they did another one, but take 25 is what you hear. There's all kinds of evidence that Alex is always, either reining him in or specifically even telling Ed, you're going too fast or you're going too slow, speed it up. He's like verbally telling him that but it's visual cues, and to me, like, I can only say that I think it's all about Alex as far as the time and the decisions, except for when you have that kind of thing, like in the beginning of On the One. I talk about that. I have a video where I talk about that where Edward is going way too fast. He's like 225 beats a minute or something like that. And then Al gradually pulls him back like maybe 20, 25 beats a minute slower. And then they settle into that groove.
Right.
I think the same thing probably happened when they were tracking Love Walks In. It's Al made it work, not because Ed had great time. Al made it work because Al knows Ed and he could piece it together after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's the only one who can tell him what to do.
Recording drums over a synthesizer track or just any track in general that has any melodic timing and like already recorded is really freaking hard, and I can attest to that because John and I did Why Can't This Be Love, and he recorded the synth, everything was done, and so we recorded along to his arpeggiator, which is basically it's kind of like, I'm sure you guys are well aware of Pete Townsend and The Who, and how so many of the songs eventually started having those kind of like synthesizer kind of things, which really kept Keith like in time.
Yeah. And
it's the same kind of deal. Like I had to do some tricks like in post to make it really like lock in well, but it's really hard to record without, especially a visual reference. Like when you're playing guitar with a drummer, you play so much better than without, because you see them hit the snare, you see them hit the cymbals, and you see everything. So I also did a cover with this guy Connor. We did I Want Some Action a couple weeks ago, and I just decided I was like, let's just do I'll just set a click to whatever 135 beats per minute or whatever, and so you just record your part to that, and I'll record my part to that. And like there's parts like the parts where everyone drops out and it's just Ed kind of doing the right before the chorus, like Ed slows down a ton, and then there's the first hit, the I want, so that part is super slow too. So I'm sure I noticed it. And I hate. I haven't watched the video since I posted it because I all I can do is get annoyed with how quick it feels being to a click, and that's just the symbiosis of them together. Like you have to slow things down. And I've argued with people online about the whole like click track to songs thing. It's like it does help, but I mean, when you sacrifice the feel of the song, then I don't think it helps.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the modern age, you can. I mean, I set all the time. Like when I did the cover with John with the synthesizer, I made. I took in my digital audio workstation. I aligned a grid to his synthesizer, which I'm sure it was pretty perfect, plus or minus whatever his Oberheim was falling in and out of time. Being that old or whatever, but you know, it's like a homemade
because every time you change a key, you got to be, So that was my fault. But
yeah, like you can swing it now. You can make a click track that does slow down for the intro of Love Walks In and stuff, but not back then. Obviously, I mean, barely anyone was using click tracks, anyways.
Hey Reggie, did you guys just real quick when you guys worked with Neil Kernan? Did he have you guys? He was just coming off Dokken and all that stuff. Did you guys do click tracks to everything?
Yeah, everything was clicked.
Yeah,
he was big time onto the click, and we just ran a cowbell through a PA for about a month, and it drove us nuts. But oh my God, full volume back at us. Even we just recorded. We just finished recording our 4th record, and we did it with Will Yip, and big time click. Everything on a click. And Will's a drummer, and he's with Turnstile. And big time tough on Dave. Three like 12-hour days of just bringing click track. But it's all good.
Wow. Yeah. It's like standard now, I guess, everywhere, right?
Yep. I mean, I kind of miss the days of things speeding up and slowing down, but I get it. And after the fact, it makes things so much easier to cut and paste, because you're on the grid.
Yeah, when you go play live too, because now they have everything sequenced to the lights and the everything's so you need it to be right on, right?
Right on, everything's right on, and I was grateful for. But doing the recording, I was like, oh my God, this thing's driving me nuts. But it's all good.
I produced a demo for a band that was like we had a deal with Mike Klink and everything like that. But I was just helping them out with demos to give to him. The drummer had. On this one song they did, he had a shift of 10 BPM, and this was before Drum Doctor on Pro Tools, and so I had to actually cut each measure, time stretching on each measure to get it all to the same tempo, and it was like a tedious process.
Gosh.
I mean, it was like about a 4-minute song, and how many bars are there in a 4-minute song? So I had to do each bar and time stretch each one.
I know we're sort of working our way around the 5150 thing, but the story that reminds me about that is the story with Cinderella's drumming, right? Reggie, you probably can speak to that. Like basically, like Andy Johns, who of course later produces Van Halen, is like, "Sorry, this isn't going to work. I'm making a phone call," and calls Cozy to come in, right?
Yeah, it was brutal. It was wow. Like Jim Jarnick is one of the best drummers in this area, and for some reason Andy did not like him, and
wow.
And he brought in. I don't think it was Cozy for the first record. Was it Cozy for the first record?
Fred probably drummed on the first. I don't know.
No, I don't think Fred played on the first one. I could be wrong, but I know that they brought in somebody, and Jim said he went home and broke every china dish in his house, but whoever they brought in, I mean, Andy was big time. I don't even think Jeff played the guitars on it. I know they brought in Barry DiBenedetta to play a lot of the guitars, and it's nuts. He was very picky about everything being right on.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was pretty. Yeah, that must have been good.
I think for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge was definitely tracked with a click, and I think that was Alex's first experience with a legitimate click track. And John actually asked me is pound cake to a click, because it sounds it, and I used my DAW to align just the grid, and it was pretty dead on. I think he comes in a little fast, which a lot of people do. I do it all the time, and then it kind of locks in immediately. But I think that album is like Mutt Lange like quality. Like,
although I think the thing with the click, I think Alex got used to the click from When It's Love live, because they were using the sequencers for Mine All Mine and When It's Love. And so he had gotten some practice with that.
Yeah.
They may have used a click in the studio for When It's Love, as a matter
I
of
think on the final tours, I think Alex, there's a click on everything, I'm sure.
the last few
it was
tours.
a cowbell, like Reggie said. It was the did you ever hear Alex's thing? It was a cowbell. I remember I heard a clip of it somewhere, and it's like bong bong. It was like, oh my god.
And Alex is deaf as a post from the monitors that were in, just like Ginger Baker, he had those Marshalls. He's deaf as a post. So yeah, that would have been loud.
Yeah, that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
One last thing on Why Can't This Be Love? I have the OB8. So Eddie used the OBXA on Jump in 1984. The OB8 is identical synthesizer to the OBXA, except it has the thing that's called the arpeggiator, which gives you those 16th notes that go, you know. And on Up for Breakfast to use it feels so good. I mean, and it's on all the keyboard songs. Even Dreams is basically it's the same patch A1, which is a factory patch.
Yeah.
Except he tweaks the knobs a little bit to change it around, but it's analog, and we were just talking about analog. It oscillates, so it actually the left hand on Why Can't This Be Love that Tanner was talking about. That's a problem. It speeds up slightly and slows down throughout the whole song. It's not perfect like nowadays. We would do it like it would be perfect.
Digital clock.
But it wasn't. So Alex had to play along live with Ed right there and follow that 16th note through the whole song to get it perfect. So I'm sure
I had to crank it. I had to crank it in my headphones. I think I pretty much, when I did the cover, I turned the lead down just a little bit, and I cranked the arpeggiator up because I've got just a pair of Sony monitors, which aren't like very noise reducing. So when you're playing drums, all you can hear is the damn drums. So I'm sure Alex probably did the same thing where you just juice the frickin' arpeggiator into your ears, and then you have a very consistent click track to play along to.
And if you notice when they play it live, it doesn't sound anything like the album, because the left hand, the right hand is the OB8, but the left hand is a different synthesizer, and they were using a Roland like sequencer, and they probably made it like lined up perfect so that Alex could follow it easier, because the OB8 does it goes it speeds up and slows down slightly, but it's not perfect.
Yeah.
But it's the brown sound of synthesizers. It's like Prophets. Ed was using all of them right in the early '81, Chris Prophets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that when he landed on the Oberheim, and it does, even if you hate the keyboard Van Halen songs, you got to admit they just sound majestic, and that's because of the OB8. Everybody was using that in the '80s. I mean, if you go on Wikipedia and look up the OB8, and every song it's on, it's like mind blowing. All the songs that it's on.
Oh yeah, no, it was. I mean, I worked at Roland just after that. I started working for Roland in '87, and actually dealt with. That's when I first dealt with Ed. Actually, was more for the SD 3000s and stuff like that. But keyboards, like anything Ed wanted, he was one of the few people that got stuff. Right. We would send it to him and no problem.
Yeah,
but
D50, Roland D50, that was big.
The D50, yeah.
He used that a lot.
But the Oberheim was, I mean, as far as before it really became fully saturated with DX7s and D50s and everything like that, which happened really at the last half of the 80s.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was progressing, about 1984 and everything like that. But yeah, the sound of an analog synth is just, it's still kind of hard to beat,
Right. Yeah. Still to this day.
Yeah.
Les, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, does your Oberheim, does it drift a lot timing wise and tuning wise? Because a lot of my analog delays, like my old Roland STEs from the early, they drift, and sometimes they drift more than.
Yeah, it's.
Cool.
I don't have any problem now.
My H3 drifted a lot.
Yeah,
it's just the nature of analog, and until you started getting digital oscillators and things like that, and then everything started shifting to digital. But yeah, analog just by nature, it's just like the heat inside the circuit board and everything like that will cause things to just start to.
Yeah.
It's not scientific. Not scientific. It's not stable.
Yeah. It's not stable, and I talked to some of you guys about that with Johnny and Tanner and Chris. We had talked about it when I was doing my Jump transcription. The OBXA to calibrate that is incredibly hard, and you would have then had to have shipped it back to Oberheim, have them calibrate it for you, because that process is not easy, and then it would still drift. And like Johnny says, the OB8, just an overall more stable thing, and it didn't drift as bad as the OBXA.
Mine's drifting right now. It's 43 years old, but it's like I have to get, and you try to find somebody to work on these things now, and it's just like, and they're worth incredible amounts of money, and there's no case that fits it, so you got to drive it, and I'm not going into Manhattan. What's that place, Armin's on 47th Street?
Oh no, we'll talk offline. I can tell you where to go.
Good, thank you, Chris.
It's expensive, unfortunately, though. That's the problem, but I can tell where to go.
So I was going to say the like the bands like UK, the English prog guys, were using these synthesizers. Were they sort of the ones who sort of think Ed sort of borrowed from? Again, I don't know much about.
They were probably using the OBX, like the original one, like the early in 1981, 82,
like the Gary Newman.
Yeah,
like if you think of Cars,
right?
If you listen to Cars, that really fat sound, something like that would have been
Polymoog, actually.
Yeah, he looked.
Yeah. He was big on the Polymoog. So, but the Polymoogs, oh my God, talk about drift. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to bring up a point to get off a little of the tech stuff, but new singer with 5150. We have the Rings logo for the first time, but it's kind of like, I don't know, Greg, if you know anything about this or not, but I was talking with Jeff Hausman just recently, over at the Van Halen store on the news desk, and none of the merch for the tour had that logo, the Rings logo, and we don't see the Rings logo on OU812, and it comes back finally for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. And it's kind of an interesting thing. I think it was kind of like this, it was just this artistic thing of the Van Halen logo.
Well,
but it somehow came up like, well, maybe we should stick with that.
I don't even know who designed the. I'd have to go look and who did the cover for them. I mean, again, the always the kind of the common wisdom, true or not, is that like it was mostly Dave and Angelus. I know that Alex did stuff with Fair Warning and stuff like that, and Alex was more influential probably than people know about the artwork. But like, presumably, those guys have stepped away now, and I just can't see like Ed and Mike and Alex sitting down and being like puzzling over like logos and
Well, for the album, Greg, right quick, it is Jerry McManus, art direction by Van Halen. So
dude,
art direction credit. I don't know about that.
Pete's anyway. Rick Serini did the other ones, and he was he was a very well known guy for Warner Brothers and did a lot of stuff. So he did Women and Children Fair. I think all those like mid career Van Halen records. So but like direction, like I don't coming out of the egg and everything. I mean, I don't know, like. With the logo, I don't know the answer to that question about the origin.
But it's interesting because it's like it does seem like there's a bit of a lull, and I need to go back and really look it's like it vanished. It was not on any of the tour T-shirts at all. There is not a single Rings logo.
You're right. I actually, when I went to the tour, I bought 2 T-shirts. I bought there was a white one.
Right, that's the one I bought. Right,
old style logo, which was like red, white, and blue on a white T-shirt, and then I got the album cover one. Which I guess technically has the Rings because it's the album cover, but that was it.
Yeah, but it wasn't like it became known later as like it's the Sammy Hagar iteration of the Van Halen logo, but it was really an afterthought. It wasn't by design. That's the interesting thing to me that it kind of was an eureka moment when Jeff mentioned that. And it was like, wow, it's like you're right.
Right, sort of like direction by I just imagine being like, we need something like we need something new. This is fuck Dave, whatever. His era. Like, what if we take you can imagine it was not maybe like a very long process of creativity. Just like, let's do this. What do you guys think about this? I'm not shitting on the art director, but like, what do you guys think about this? And sure, sounds good or whatever. Like,
I think even with the Atlas cover and everything like that, it was just like it was the Van Halen logo wrapped around the globe. It wasn't designed to be this new Van Halen logo. It was the classic Van Halen logo just wrapped around the globe.
Right.
And then later they came and said like, hey, let's run with that.
Right.
I actually love that. I think it looks great, that the Rings thing. A lot of people are like, oh, the purists. The original is great too. I like them both. I love them both.
Yeah, they're both cool. They're very. It's kind of cool to think that it was kind of just an afterthought, though. It's like wow, it's like it wasn't by design.
Yeah.
Right.
Like you try to think like we're with a new singer here and we're taking a new identity and everything like that.
Right.
Reggie, you were playing clubs. Obviously, you were playing clubs in Philadelphia in '86 when 5150 came out.
Yep.
What was the kind of the reaction of you guys? Like you saw them in '78 at the Spectrum and everything. Like Chris did. Like you go way back to like.
I go back to the second tour. I actually heard there was a tour with Journey before that, which I did not see at the Tower Theater in Philly. But I saw the one with Sabbath. I saw the 5150. I thought they were great.
Wow.
I'm a big Dave guy, and but I think Sammy wrote some great songs with them. I was kind of disappointed with Why Can't This Be Love? I was like, oh, they've changed so much, but the rest of the record with Dreams and all that, just unbelievable. And now I love Why Can't This Be Love? But I think initially people were like, wow, they've changed a lot. From I'm the One to Why Can't This Be Love is a big difference.
But then you go from Get Up to I'm the One. It's the same.
Right.
I mean, or the same kind of vibe, obviously.
Right.
Milking that boogie vibe, with the Steinberger going.
Right. I mean, it was definitely different, but obviously they knew what they were doing. They were better than ever. I saw that tour, and they were great.
Great for the times. I think Dave. I kind of mentioned that. Dave was intimidating. And Sammy was like, he was a guy you could have a beer with, to use that phrase. About George W. and everything like that. But it's like, he was relatable. Why can't this be love? Not, ain't talking about love, It's really, Dave was all, I'm bragging, I'm coming in, I'm taking over, or Sammy's like, hey, let's hang and party, stuff. He was not threatening. He was an everyman, and Dave could be a little bit out there at times, And I think that, Sammy was much more down to earth, and it was just the perfect thing that Van Halen needed at that time, because they had broken through to the masses with 1984, and they couldn't really continue to be this kind of hard hitting, band and have this guy, who like Dave's like, I'm, did the Famous Us Festival, I'm going to fuck your girlfriend, and everything. And, it was just like, hey, I'll be your wingman, kind of guy.
Jimmy.
There's one thing, Chris, that I'd like to share with you guys too, and I think we've got to remember this specifically for that period of time back in 1986. Van Halen with this album and Why Can't This Be Love had an effect on normal people. It had that commercial thing, that vibe to it that was being played here in New Zealand on, popular radio stations. And friends and people who weren't Van Halen fans were locking onto this thing. And that wasn't a bad thing back in 1986, because if you go and look and see what the top 10 was in 1986, you had rock right there with pop, and it wasn't a bad thing. So we were kind of excited, because we were Van Halen fans going back to 81, 1980, 1982, before they became famous. And I remember being excited as a fan, thinking, oh, wow, this band's going to become popular. And that wasn't, a bad thing.
No, it really wasn't. And it was really, it was kind of a culture. I mean, the thing is, the record did not meet, 1984. That was just a phenomenon. That was just huge and everything like that. And it didn't sell at the pace that 1984 did, but it still was really successful. And that's a hard thing to do with a brand new singer and a brand new identity and really a brand new sound for the most part. Right.
The tour was a big success too.
And the tour was a very big success.
Right. Yeah, you can be sure that everyone at Warner Brothers was celebrating. I mean, they were like overjoyed, because it was like, I'm sure, again, I'm just giving you my personal opinion that it certainly exceeded expectations. Probably, I sincerely doubt they thought it was going to go to number one with Sammy. I mean, they probably thought it was going to be huge, or like, I shouldn't say maybe go to number one, but like have the go to over 5 million and kind of like go towards eventually towards 10 million by the 90s or whatever. But so I suspected, there was a lot of, at least from what I understand, like some like, we don't know if it's going to work, because nobody knew if it was going to work for sure.
Greg, would they have been happy if it was a top 10 or a top 20 album? The executives at Warner's?
No,
Oh, sure.
I think they thought it was good. It's just a matter of was it going to succeed like on the level of what had come before, right? There,
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? No, I don't think they thought it was going to. I don't think they thought it was going to bomb. Although I do think that there was definitely a narrative that there was like the brothers were like off the reservation sort of, and how they approached life in general. Like, and that was the and that was the Mick Jones factor. Like, we need somebody to go up there to like verify there's going to be like some adult
Something.
supervision, right? I
Yeah.
mean, really, that's what it is. I mean, that's what it was. And that's one I strongly believe that's why there was at least this sort of like thought that like maybe Ted would produce it, like maybe, even though that would have been, I think, a difficult thing. They probably would have been professional and done it, but that, if they had him in there, no one at Warner Brothers was going to be like, well, we're not, the brothers self-producing, like basically that was probably like, I don't know, because they were getting, the tapes didn't get turned in. We go through the whole stuff in 1984, like, and certainly from Ted's perspective, like he's probably like, I don't know about that. I'm not sure that's the wisest course of action, is to have those guys locked up at Howdy Doody Mountain and like, in control of their own destiny, right?
Ted was the perfect guy. I mean, look at his history with both Sammy and Van Halen. Right. It's like he was the man.
Right. And that's why Loeffler was so angry, right, that day at Ted. Yeah. Like, he was like, what do you mean? You love Sammy. And Ted, we don't need to go through all that. But, like, that's why I think Loeffler kind of went crazy because Ted was like, it's a different band. It's a different band to me. It's not the thing. It's different. That's.
The interesting thing to me, too, is to compare, I mean, just to bring it back a little bit, is like compare Dave's Eat 'em and Smile and how it did compared to 5150.
Yeah.
And,
didn't do as good.
It didn't do as good, and it was a phenomenal band and it was a really good record, and it was really, I mean, I personally was of the camp that I kind of strayed over towards the Dave camp, to be honest, and I kind of, my interest in Van Halen kind of waned, I'm a guitar geek. And
he didn't have the name and he didn't have the songs. I mean, that was the
it didn't. He had the image, and everything. And Vi's an incredible player, and for me as a guitarist, I thought that was it was kind of a cooler record from a guitar geek standpoint. But that doesn't sell. Doesn't put butts in seats and doesn't move units.
Well, I'm gonna jump in real quick, in case I got to get my kids to bed, but I did see the tour, as I mentioned, and the tour blew me away. And it kind of, I was already, a fan. He, as you guys know, he's the reason why I play guitar.
Yeah.
And it only just really, the guitar, the musicianship was insane. And that, like I was saying earlier, I had worked the summer and gathered $300 together so that I could go to the show in the front row.
Wow.
Right. Right. And it was and back then, as I was saying off camera, $150 could buy you the best seat in the house in any arena in the country in 1986.
Right.
It was still a lot of money back then, and for a little kid who did not ever have a job before, yeah, it was horrible. I mean, it was like, well, actually, I didn't mow lawns. I worked at a horrible telemarketing firm, and some lawns, but but that's how I got in, and I was. I turned 14 that summer and brought my girlfriend, my first official girlfriend. And so she and I, my mom had an extra seat. So she was way in the back of the arena. She drove us in and let me and my girlfriend go up to the front.
Wow.
And we were right up against the barricade. And so that night at the beginning of the show, I had read, all of the magazines, and I had read, one of Rosen's Guitar for the Practicing Musician articles, and I recognized Zeke right away. And so he's just there, moseying around, and, I'm an idiot. I'm like, hey, Zeke, can I get a pic? And I said, I saw you in the magazine, and Zeke, to his eternal credit, he came over and gave me an unused pic from Edward. And that is that one right there.
That's really cool. Wow. That's really cool.
At the beginning of the show, an unused pic. And then during the guitar solo segment, I caught this one from Edward.
Wow. You got your $150 back.
There you go.
Exactly. Amazing. And then by some miracle, even, I caught two from Michael Anthony.
Wow.
There's a nice big pick slide scrape. I think during the bass solo is when I got this one, and then got this one. And these were things where I don't know how I got so lucky. I literally reached up and grabbed this one in the air when he threw it. This one fell on the ground, and I managed to get to it before anybody else.
Yeah.
So, it was a mind-blowing experience. And of course, like I was obsessed with the David Letterman tone. Ed played some great covers on there, and he played, the most just ballsy version of Sunshine of Your Love I ever heard in my life. When I saw that show, they did indeed play Sunshine of Your Love, and I went ape shit, and we had such a great time. I mean, man, so they did a lot of covers. So, screw you, Ed, with your talking about covers, because of course you did Wild Thing, you did Rock and Roll, you did Sunshine, and you did, of course, do You Really Got Me, right there at the outset of the set. I mean, man, it was so good from all angles to me. I was so incredibly excited. So, and of course, I'm a kid. I don't have the history of, if I had been, in San Diego when Chris was there to see, the 78, 79 shows, I could see how, whoa, this is not of that quality. But, Ed was still at a technical.
Oh, no, I always got to thrill seeing Ed no matter what. I mean, the NAMM show stuff, again, bring up the guitar battles, the Steve Vai versus Eddie Van Halen at NAMM stuff, the Ibanez booth with the new gem, whereas Ed at the Kramer booth, and it just, Ed still won hands down.
Right.
The NAMM jam, that was a hard ticket to get when you knew it was going to be Kramer and Seymour Duncan and Ed was going to be playing. That was the tough ticket to get. That's the one that you went to the booth wherever and you scrummed and you brought like a bottle of booze or a 6-pack or whatever to bribe one of the sales guys into giving you a ticket. You went there first thing as soon as the NAMM show opened, or even before it was open to the public.
Yeah.
To get a ticket to that show, I was just constantly
Wow. That's cool.
Yeah, Ed ruled. I mean, it's he won
and
that.
The 5150 tour, I had to say, like I'd said off camera, oh my God, it was so loud. I mean, it was loud as hell. And then Pyro John's pyro goes off. I mean, it was just deafening. And of course, I'm right in the front row. And man, that stuff, and my little, 120-pound 14-year-old body, man, oh my God, it just kaboom. And like my ears were ringing, the smell of the, the smell of the gunpowder. Oh my God, it just floored me. It was hot. Oh man, those stage lights were so hot,
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, it blew my mind. Everybody was just so top level, and that was just insane, So I'm one of those kind of weird fans, like most of us are. We love Dave, probably prefer Dave overall, but man, I still think that the 5150 and to a slightly lesser degree OU 812 were still amazing records. 5150 is to me still a classic record. It's the best Sammy Hagar era record in my opinion. I just think it's so good, and I just love it. That's why I'm happy to jump on and talk with you guys about it. So anyway, that's my little show and tell. So.
Jimmy, we were at we didn't know each other, but we were at the Meadowlands in the beginning of August. When did they film Live Without a Net? It was a couple weeks later, I think, right?
Yeah, 26th and 27th. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, Alan was talking about being in the front row. I went August 1st. I'll never forget it. And I was probably 2 rows from the back of Brendan Byrne.
Oh yeah, I was there too.
Wow.
I remember I went to 2 shows. I don't remember which ones. Go ahead, but tell your story. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it was. They had 4 nights there.
Yeah.
And August 1st was the last night, and me and my buddy came in from Connecticut. I don't even know how I got there because there was no GPS. I think I had a map. I'd never been out of Connecticut, and I was there, and I'm like, I'm thinking my seat's here. There might have been a row behind me, but that was it. And I'm like, man, I'm in the same freaking venue as Edward Van Halen, and he blew my freaking rock. But what I wanted to bring up was, this didn't come up before, but with the whole, Hagar joins the band, they go out on tour, everything, play the shows. I remember when I was there, at the concert, and you see it on Live Without a Net, where, people are throwing up stuff and, fuck Dave and, Dave who. But, that always bugged me as a kid. Because, okay, those other 3 guys, they had, I don't know, 16 years with Dave, okay, to get pissed off, you know, or to have Dave do 16 years of bullshit to them. But Hagar, like, why is Hagar hating Dave? I never understood that.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think that was off-putting to me too, and I think that's probably why I really strayed more towards Dave, because Dave just was like, he still was just Dave.
Yeah.
You know, he was off humorous stuff. He wasn't really throwing the disses out there, and I mean, he did from time to time. But as far as the public, you know, at the shows and whatever, you know, he didn't do an inside track, you know, or anything like that. You know, so he was kind of in a way the bigger man in that respect. He moved on.
I definitely remember at least one of the 5150 shows that Jimmy, you might remember at the Meadowlands. I'd have to go look at my stubs. I don't remember which nights I saw. I saw 2 nights, but the sign, and like Roth always said in interviews that it was a prop, right? That it was actually like the roadies were like tossing the same, which probably isn't true, but they're basically like, you know, but it definitely came out like the fuck Dave or whatever, like, you know, Van Halen rules, Roth sucks, or, you know, whatever, like that sign. I thought it was kind of weird. People were cheering that. I remember being like, I don't want to cheer for that. I like both. I like both bands, right?
Yeah.
I dug this out. The beer dried. It's not
I have that.
the tour book. You can see it's
Perfect.
from the 5150 tour, the Meadowlands. I
Awesome.
So cool.
I saw all 4 shows there at the Meadowlands.
I haven't seen that in years.
You went to all 4 shows? Wow.
Yeah, and I got a Michael Anthony picked that on one of them. So there's that, and then there's one great picture I love of Eddie in here that you rarely see. It's coming up.
Oh, that's cool.
That black and white one, right?
Yeah, the black and white one where he's holding the guitar. It's right here. This one. I think it's a great shot.
That's a cool.
That's a great pick.
That needs to be
Yeah.
Well, you don't see much either. You know,
I've never seen that one before outside.
Yeah, it's a great one, is it?
Yeah.
So there's that, and then over here is more.
Yeah.
There's
a classic shot.
Yeah.
Yep.
With those.
And there's look at the guitar there. He's playing.
The 1984.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
Wow.
And let's see. Then we got Sammy, and there's your John Watkins Explosions or whatever. Alan.
Yes.
I think I see Alan right there, man.
Yeah. I went to see them in Austin, Texas at the Frank Irwin Center. And man, yes, I was right there when that happened, inches away from that. And guess my ears came back.
Alan, let me ask you. You talked about getting, you know, the front. How did in 1986? How did you get those tickets? Because
it was just straight up scalpers, and at that time, scalpers had their own. You know, they had their own legitimate businesses.
Ticket agencies.
Agencies, yeah. And there was actually a brick and mortar ticket agency, you know, in Austin that we went to. I was living in San Marcos, which is a little drive to Austin, but you know, that was how you did it. And when I moved to Houston, there was a brick and mortar place, and so I did that several times for, you know, some really great shows to get, you know, really good seats. But then by the late 2000s, as Napster took over and the profit went out of music, then the charging of a lot of money for tickets started happening, and the whole Live Nation and live music in general as a way to save the music industry started happening, and that's why the ticket prices are totally ridiculous now. But back then, it was very much reachable. You know, I would have had to work for 3 months, you know, doing a horrible job and save every single penny because I was still living at home with my mom and I was 14 years old. But that's how I did it. You know.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Here, I got this right here. I'll wait for Johnny to finish his show and tell here, which is awesome. Look at that. Yeah, the keyboards.
This is amazing to see this.
We got that in my basement. Yeah. Yeah.
Al holding the Dean 55 guitar. That's amazing.
And last but not least, poor Mike.
Yeah.
Mikey. Yeah.
How many pages does he get?
He gets less pictures than the rest of them.
That's so true.
And he had a picture.
Yeah, exactly.
Poor guy.
Came out of his per diem.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I was right there, where those people are reaching out to him. I mean,
wow,
I'm right
awesome.
there.
So great.
Wow.
So great. Yeah.
I was actually lucky to catch the 5150 at the 86 Texas Jam.
Oh yeah.
And I was right up close, and I remember Zeke coming out there with Ed's guitar, tuning it.
The crew.
And,
Wow.
and it was great. It was hot, and they were just on fire. It was amazing. It was a great show. I wish somebody would have filmed that or bootlegged it or
Doogie and Zeke and all those guys.
Pyro right in the front.
That was a great stage, just clean. I always loved that.
Yeah, I did. Too.
Now we saw the indoor. I saw the indoor show, but the outdoor show that you would have saw in the Cotton Bowl, I think it was.
Yes, it was.
Yeah,
No,
so
there's
that's
that
when they
5
did
string.
the big,
apostrophe. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when they did the big banner thing of the 50.
Yeah, 5150s on the left and the right.
Yeah.
And God, it's amazing. I'm still wondering how high they were. They were just bigger than everything because I was right up front, so all you could see was just the top of that, and it was so crowded, and I was right up there, and it was
Awesome.
amazing. People were running left and right, and everything. And you know what's funny? I didn't see any signs. I mean, sure there was that said something, but all you could see was them in front and just people. But people were throwing things at Hagar and Eddie, and I remember one of them hit Ed's guitar, and he was so pissed off. One of the glow sticks, But it was great.
Like this is 1980, but anyway, real quick. But this is what Alan's talking about. Like you just like this is a New York, a New York, like basically band magazine for the East Coast. It was called the Aquarian. But like,
I remember that.
Yeah, and it was either that or you tried to get. They didn't really do the ticket lottery so much. You really could at that time actually just go stand in line on the day and get there super early, and you could get first come first serve great seats.
Yeah, and then find out that all the good tickets were actually sold to the scalpers and to like the kids whose moms worked like
and the radio station.
Right.
Yeah.
We all did it. We all did it.
I remember the yellow pages in the phone book. You could actually find a ticket. That's where in 1984, looking at find the scalper, whatever. But they were actually had advertisements in the actual yellow pages of the thick phone book back then.
Wow,
crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's a legitimate business.
They're selling you on their service of standing in line and getting the tickets, or at that time they were flooding. They were starting to use phone calls to get in slightly later,
right? Or they were just bribing, the people.
They had deals with the promoters.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I mean, I told you guys before we went online about how when, I lived in Dallas for a short period, the semester I went to SMU and I was in a punk band and we used to play this club and he was also a promoter and he had to book the police, at McFarland Auditorium at SMU in Dallas. And he called, us guys in the punk band and said like, hey, I'm putting the tickets on sale, in an hour, but if you go, they're online now. So if you go to the ticket place, the ticket, whatever the place that sells tickets, you can buy tickets. And we got there and got second row center. And he already had the first row for all his friends, and everything. But that was just very typical. I dealt with many people, in the business and stuff. And there was always blocks of seats that were held aside for the ticket agencies. That was just part of the deal, and that was just, they
don't care. They just want to sell the tickets. They just want to sell the arena.
It was the promoter got a cut. It's like an extra spiff for them. Above and beyond,
right?
And whatever. And it was just business. It's
and now look what it's grown into, Chris.
Reggie, how have you survived so many decades
Yeah.
in this corrupt business? You've been playing music in clubs since like I was in elementary school. How do you survive so many years in this? This business is so corrupt.
I don't know. I was just thinking about I saw something with Metallica last week where the guy was in line and queue online, and there was 300,000 people ahead of him. Or something.
Yeah. Oh, that happened with I got tickets for my daughter for My Chemical Romance, and when they're playing at Met Stadium in City Field coming up in August of this year. The tickets were on sale a couple months ago. And I got on the queue and I thought, okay, I'm in and everything like that. And my number came up and it was I think I was 150,000. I said, there's no way. And everybody's got to be buying at least two, so it's I'm really 300,000 back or whatever. But the ticket prices were so high that after an hour, I just said, I'm just going to stick it out. And after an hour had passed, I came up and there was all these seats available because the ticket prices were so high.
Wow.
Yeah.
My friend,
and that happens too now because you can kind of get in on the back end when the tickets don't sell, and then you can pick some up like that.
Right.
So that's
Like
part of the trick too.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
Pays
and
to
as
wait.
I had
Right.
mentioned offline before, when Chris mentioned going to My Chemical Romance, and I had mentioned my friend Stephen Droz from the Flaming Lips, and we he was sharing a bill with My Chemical Romance, and my best friend got her little sister, and we all went, and she got to meet My Chemical Romance, and she thought it was like the greatest thing in the world, and I'm just like, really? Okay. But that was in the days also because it's the days of ticket agencies, but it was also the days before there was a meet and greet package or a gold circle seating or any of that stuff. There was no like pre-sale for Amex or any of that kind of stuff. So, like when you did get to go backstage or if you did get to meet somebody, you were either like a hardcore groupie, you had drugs, or you were just incredibly lucky, and it was just a completely different time, for shows and things kind of, got changed quite a bit, obviously.
Yeah.
I had my buddy had a demon dialer, and I remember I wanted tickets for Power Slave for Iron Maiden, and you had to call to get tickets. And we were like, and apparently it would dial like faster than any phone, and we kept getting a busy signal. And we finally got there after 5 minutes, and we got great tickets. I think we got like 10th or 12th row, which was not bad in 85 for that tour. But
blind luck.
Yeah, that or go to the. I think we would go to a store and wait where people would pay their credit card bills. You just wait in line and hopefully had tickets. And they'd have a map of tickets and like, oh, these are already sold out. No matter how fast you got there. So.
I got to tell you guys a funny story about waiting in line. It was a smaller show, but this was probably about 79, I think it was. And it was the Boomtown Rats. And it was like, San Diego, Golden Hall, or Civic Center. I forget which one it was, but I drove all the way down because the best way to get tickets back then was to go to the venue. Like if you went to the head shop or the record store place that sold tickets, you didn't get as good tickets. So I drove all the way down to San Diego, ditched school, got in line. It was funny because they had these windows, all these ticket windows, like about 4 or 5 of them. And so there was like 3 guys ahead of me, and they basically went to the one furthest down or whatever, and then went from there. And when it finally opened up, my window, that was the last window, opened up first. So I got front row center. Now, the kicker was the show got canceled because that was when I Don't Like Mondays became a big controversy because there was that girl in San Diego who shot those kids. And
oh, God, yeah.
And all these people were saying they were going to boycott and protest the show and everything like that. So the Boomtown Rats just said we're going to cancel the show and out of respect and not play or whatever. It's like the one time that I actually bought tickets as a fan that I got front row center, and it's just like yoink.
Man. Wow.
But that was just funny because it was just like it was the pick of the draw, and everything like that. It was just like so random. But
yeah. And so, guys, I do have to wrap it up, and I got to get my kids to bed, and we'll get up and go to church.
Probably.
But and guess what? I didn't even start in on all the guitars that were used on every song. So
we'll fight about this another day. We'll fight about it another day.
Right.
Alex, our pleasure.
Yeah,
our pleasure to have you, Al.
It's been great catching up with you guys. I love each and every one of you. Reggie, it's a pleasure to meet you and see you.
Reggie.
Great.
Nice to meet you, Reggie.
Absolutely great.
Keep in touch all the time. Tanner is my. I'd say he was my son, but that kid who is in Bocephus mode all the time, full Bocephus mode. I don't know what I would do without Tanner. He is like so integral to me. I mean, he is my sounding board. That guy. Like if I don't know what I would do without that guy. Andrew, you're great.
You guys
Chris,
are great.
You are my Yoda. I love you. Johnny, I love you. Les and Jimmy, I love you. Greg, you are the man. I'm so grateful for everything that you have done, man. I just it's great seeing you guys and
really appreciate it.
Man.
You guys are all too.
Right on.
Take care.
God bless, Al.
Hey, thank you guys.
We could all wrap
You guys,
it up
thank you
here
so
right
much. It
now.
was really so fun.
We can all wrap it up here right now, but we can say, listen, I have no regrets. We look back at the Van Halen career, and you know what? We had great years with Dave. We had great years with Sammy, and you look at their whole catalog, and you know what? And it's pretty impressive what their Ed was able to do, things he never would have with Sammy, and vice versa with Dave, and at the end of the day, when you look back at the catalog, it's amazing. It's like you look at their greatest hits album. It's a legit double album of greatest hits. The Eagles have one. Yeah. Certain bands have them. They're very few, but theirs is one. Everybody knows those songs. Even Little
We
Guitars
had
wasn't even on
Mix Malloy.
It's greatest hits. Well, Little Guitars isn't even on that. I mean, it's one of their greatest hits to me. You know what I mean? So it's not many bands you could say that about.
Well,
So-
it was the growth. I mean, you kind of can see the writing on the wall happening with what was going on in the band too. And Ed was definitely changing musically, and as the main songwriter of the band, really the songwriter of the band, writing the music, at least aspect of it. I don't want to downplay the lyrical point and everything like that, but we know how their process works, and the music came first and the lyrics came later. Ed was changing. He was progressing. And we see that happening through the Van Halen records, and it reaches a point where, do I just want to repeat myself over and over, or do I want to grow? And it's, he grew Sammy too.
Yeah.
And I think, especially on a lyrical standpoint, I think it wasn't so much a musical standpoint with Sammy, it was more of a lyrical side of things. And Ed had matured, and he wanted to do something a little bit more deep, and he didn't want to do party music anymore.
Panama Part 2, he was into that,
I just remember, many people know, but he told me about just off to the side when the Balance interviews, just like how Amsterdam was just a breaking point with him. It was just like, God, I just don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something more meaningful and mature and whatever. And it's kind of funny how it's outside musical influences basically stopped around the same time that he did 5150, because it's like, he kept on talking about like his favorite record being So. Now he listened to other stuff, sure. He was aware of other music and everything like that, but he didn't consume music like he used to. Like you look at when he was a kid, and everything, and in the club days in the 70s, he was voracious, and he had a very deep collection of records and in bands that, that he listened to, Cactus, Trapeze, and stuff like that. These were not being played on KMET and KLOS and the radio stations of the day there in Los Angeles. He wasn't hearing that stuff on the radio. He was going out and seeking this stuff out. Even Genesis, when he called this band Genesis, and he sees a Genesis record, Genesis wasn't getting airplay in those days. That was something that you had to seek out and be curious about. And Ed was very curious musically. And I think he just reached a point, though, when you get to the mid 80s, where it's just like, it's enough. I don't need to listen to this outside stuff anymore. Now I can just focus on what's going on with me.
The only Genesis that we got that was airplayed Genesis was when Phil Collins became the vocalist. You never got the Genesis with
Peter Gabriel,
Peter Gabriel being played on the radio at all.
No.
What one thing I'd just like to share with you guys, and I suppose this is a consequence of getting older, and you look back at your experiences in your past. I turned 60 this year, and I remember this album coming out when I was 20, and they were exciting times. And being happy that the band had survived the breakup with David Lee Roth, because here in New Zealand we weren't privy to a lot of the information that you guys in the States had. We just heard that this band had broken up, that had given us 1984. We didn't know what was going to happen, and then we hear the lead single on the radio, and oh my gosh, Sammy Hagar's the lead singer of this band. What's that going to be like, guys? And then checking that out and being blown away. Completely different bands.
Yeah.
But it was always about Eddie for me anyway. It was always about Eddie, and it will always be about that for me. And listening to this album, that we're here to celebrate, and being blown away, thinking, well, you know what? This is great. There's something to move forward with here with this band, and that's what I'm always going to be forever grateful for. It's those immediate memories that you have, John. When you listen to these songs and sharing that time with some close friends, and some probably special times that you did around that time. So I'll always be thankful to Van Halen for the rest of my life.
Absolutely.
Well, the great thing is that it was like twice as much Van Halen in a weird way, because you had Dave.
You're right.
Doing his thing, and with Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan. Oh my God.
Yes. So that Skyscraper, just like living in Paradise.
Right.
Remember, you remember that song?
Yeah.
That was huge.
That was, I mean, I was at Roland. I was really thrilled because there was that one song that had the Digital Native Dance D50 preset on it at the beginning. So.
That's like the most famous patch of all time, right?
It is. It was used so many places. If you look it up, it's just like it was all over film soundtracks and records.
Yeah.
And,
Rick Springfield, everybody.
Yeah, everybody was using it.
Yeah.
But you
want that for
guys
my
are right
ringtone.
though, because you mentioned it a little bit earlier before. You know, we were excited. Okay, so David Lee Roth's gonna go off and do something too. You know, so we're gonna have Van Halen over here and David Lee Roth. But Dave, you know, didn't get the opportunity, perhaps.
And for me,
Can I ask you guys one thing? I put a question up in the chat, and it was something that was asked to me by a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago when I told him that we were doing this show, who's not a Van Halen nut like us. But he always thought that when David did that California Girls video and that song, he thought that was corny and thought maybe, did that have any effect on where Dave went after with his solo album? Did they have a negative effect because people didn't appreciate what Dave was doing with that?
I thought that was cool as fuck, man. I love California Girls.
Dave could do no wrong.
No,
Back then, he was on top.
People might think that's corny, but that was. I mean, here's Dave like that. I think California Girls was Dave in his prime, in a sense. You know, like I mean, you know, at first it starts off with like the crazy, you know, ice cream bell or whatever, and there's Dave, or you know, there's Dave like, you know, in the white hat and all that. It was just, and then forget it, all these hot chicks. I mean, I was like 16 or 17. I'm like,
it's a cover song too.
Yeah.
You know, so.
And Carl Wilson and Christopher Cross doing the background vocals. That's Christopher Cross in the high part.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I think we were primed for it already from like Hot for Teacher, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
It kind of like it wasn't Van Halen, but it was Dave solo, and the fact that it was really very smartly done as just a 4-song EP as opposed to a full-blown album.
Okay.
You know, and so I when that came out, I didn't see it as being any. It was an indulgence.
Yeah.
You know, it was to me, it was like it was no different than Ed going off and doing Starfleet with Brian May. You know, it was a side thing, and it didn't get in the way of the band. I didn't see it that way at all. You know, it wasn't until we got further on into '85 where all of a sudden all this news was brewing and all this other stuff was going on. It's like, oh, okay, you know, maybe Dave is going off on his own and everything. But yeah, I don't, you know, I think when Eat 'Em and Smile came out, at least for me, it was like, that was just such a kick-ass record, you know, and, you know, I was kind of like listening to that a little bit. I was actually listening to that more like what songs on this could have been, you know, Van Halen songs, you know, and whatever. And, you know, we know there wasn't any crossover. I mean, it was kind of weird. Like you had stuff like Big Trouble, and there was another song on there that I know was kind of in the Van Halen vernacular that was kicking around.
I think that's one of the reasons that I wanted one more rocker, because Dave's album, I think, man, at 5150 just needed one more ballsy rock song.
Yeah.
I think that was because of when I heard Dave's album, I was like, holy shit, these guys are really, you know, tearing it up, you know?
Yeah.
And Going Crazy was like the best song that they never wrote. I was like, oh, Going Crazy was like
a
Van Halen song. Great keyboards, just the lyrics. And I feel the same way about A Little Ain't Enough. I think that's just like the perfect Van Halen song that they never wrote together, you know? So it's a great song in its own.
It's amazing because if you listen to Dave's albums like that, he's got a background singer that almost sounds like Michael Anthony singing on it's like a dead ringer on some of those songs, you know?
That's an excellent point, is also how much the Van Halen background vocals changed.
Yes.
There was a definite change in personality of, you know, the vocals with Dave and the vocals with Sam. And you have harmonies, but to me, they kind of lost a little bit of that distinctive thing. Like they used to be so identifiable, like they were like the Beach Boys,
California sound kind of,
or like
right?
Yes, or whatever. You know, that you could hear that and go like Van Halen. And I felt like the vocals became a little bit less, background vocals became a little bit less distinct. I mean, a lot of people bring up Best of Both Worlds, where it's really just Sammy and Mike. and everything. And that's where a lot of people noticed Mike. And it's like, what? Haven't you been listening to the 6 other Van Halen albums that came before to know who's doing those high pitched things? That's Mike. I mean, have you not seen Van Halen live?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
But
one thing, guys, Dave was a gem when he was being interviewed. When that album dropped, when he was being asked questions about, the Van Halens, and the great thing about YouTube is that a lot of those videos and interviews are all on YouTube. Go and check them out. He's hilarious, very clever, smart, witty guy.
Yeah.
Very, and yeah. Some of the replies that he gives to people when they ask him about, his experience in Van Halen and.
Oh yeah. I think that's at the same time. I think that's where, again, it was like Sammy was the everyman. Dave he had these crazy, genius. This stuff is like really, really clever, and it goes over a lot of people's heads. And some people may think he's pretentious or he's bragging or whatever. But Dave was threatening. Very brilliant, smart guy. And Sammy was much more a regular dude. And I think that helped them out with, to carry them through the rest of the 80s. So with Van Halen, I think that, they were able to relate to a different audience, than before and everything. And I think that really helped them, have all this success and have all this string of #1 albums and everything like they did. Even if they didn't sell as many records, they still, had a big following, and it was really, really dedicated.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about the idea that if you don't like David Lee Roth era Van Halen, that you can't really be a real Van Halen fan?
What?
I agree.
What?
Me too.
Yeah. If you, you understand what?
Basically, what he's
If
saying.
you only like the Van Hagar era, then you're not really a Van Halen fan.
That's kind of like saying you can't, if you're not a Beatles fan, you can't be a Paul McCartney and Wings fan or something. I don't know.
No. What I relate that to is I am not a fan of Bon Scott, AC/DC, so I wouldn't really consider myself an AC/DC fan.
Well, I can see that, but that's I mean, I don't know. Bon Scott was just, gosh, I don't know. Those records are classic, and it took me a while to warm up.
So you can be a Van Halen fan and not like David Lee Roth. I can't process that.
Nah.
No, I can't process it.
Yeah,
I can't.
I mean,
Reggie, what do you think?
I mean, no, it's all Dave for me. I love the Sammy stuff, but my obsession stopped when Sammy joined the band. Like I listened to those first 5 records all on loop.
Yeah.
And I stopped with Sammy, although I respected it. It's just and I've even tried to go back and listen to him. I just didn't have the same obsession for me.
No, I think anybody that's approaching it from a guitar player point of view is like Reggie's. I think we all feel that way, kind of.
Yeah, but what I'm saying though is everybody here loves Dave. You have to take that out, right? And think of it as you hate David Lee Roth. I just can't process that you're a Van Halen fan. If you hate Dave. Anyway, I'll drop it, but
no, I think I mean
it seems like you're a Van Halen fan.
I fight with people all the time on Facebook about this because they're all Sammy Hagar fans and they all shit all over Dave, and I find myself shitting on Sammy, even though I like the Sammy stuff, but I find myself shitting on Sammy because of it, and it's like, but I actually like him,
Yeah, it's kind of like liking the new Star Wars but hating the originals,
no, definitely. Yeah, I can. Yeah. I guess that's a good way to put it, actually. But it's. I mean, I can't say the AC/DC thing because Back in Black was just such a huge phenomenon. That was a big record, and it's a great record. And,
it's a masterpiece.
As much I can't remember Brian Johnson. I mean, Brian Johnson took a while for me to warm up to because I was a AC/DC fan from early on and everything, and saw them and saw Bon Scott, at San Diego just before he passed. He
wow,
OD'd and everything. But and what a magnetic performer. I mean, what a front man. I mean, just really, but I don't know, but that was, the AC/DC thing, Back in Black was such a great record. I mean, you just can't deny the power of Back in Black. That is just, that's riff 101. It's, if you want to know what a great guitar riff is, just listen to Back in Black. And that was just part of the whole direction they were going. Here's I mean, I don't want to take this off Van Halen, but it's like, would Back in Black been as big if Bon was still alive? It may not have been,
You never know, right?
I can see what some people say, like, yeah, I can see Bon being a little bit off-putting. His voice is a little bit weird, and everything. But I think for like Highway to Hell and all that stuff, it just, who else,
I just can never get over the fact that Highway to Hell and Back in Black were both released the same year. I think,
Really?
January, I think Highway to Hell was, then Bon Scott died in February. And I think in November of 80 is when Back in Black was released.
Wow.
Crazy.
I never knew that. I never knew that.
And Mutt Lange produced Highway to Hell too. And
I never knew that.
It's crazy. Yeah, is that crazy?
Wow.
Within the 12 months, those two masterpiece albums.
That's insane.
Well, they were just.
And Mutt Lange is responsible for Brian singing in that falsetto voice, because before that he was just singing in his quote unquote normal voice.
Geordie voice. Yeah, Geordie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Yeah. Well, the two bands that survived and flourished with two different singers are Van Halen and AC/DC,
It doesn't happen too often, Lightning strike twice all the time, and it's a tough thing, and Ed tried to do it a third time, and it just didn't gel.
No.
And that's why I think Alex is a fool to try and bring in another singer into this thing. And it's, I've said this online and to a number of people, but it's like, if he's going to do a new record, to do what Ed wanted to do in between 84 and 5150 and do the multi-singer thing, grant Ed his wish on that.
Instrumental, please.
Go ahead.
I said instrumental, please.
Yeah, I think he's going to have to do what Chris says, though, because I don't think he's going to be able to get, like Paul Rogers said he couldn't do it, wouldn't do whatever. I don't think people are going to commit to a whole album. Maybe they'll do one song a singer,
and who wants to step into that maelstrom anyways? It's just like it can be damaging to your career. I mean, my gosh, we're still debating Dave versus Sammy, to this day, let alone bringing in Gary Sharon and whatever.
So are you saying, Chris, it could be a catastrophe, this album, if they bring in a variety of lead singers? It could.
No, I think that would be the way to go. I think finding a singer, like Alex wants to get a singer. He wants to get Paul Rogers or Robert Plant, or whatever, to be the singer on this album of unreleased material, which is basically, from what I can understand, reading through the lines, is just basically what the leftover tracks. Like Ed told me about all these tracks that they had done for A Different Kind of Truth that they had, and they were done. It was just they didn't have Dave's vocals on them, and they basically had part of the process of doing A Different Kind of Truth. They picked, okay, we're going to do these, and then Dave did his thing, and they were done. But they had all these instrumental tracks done. And they just need vocalists on them. Of course, I think Alex thinks there still needs to be what he calls this, glue or whatever. I think, unfortunately, A Different Kind of Truth had too much glue. I think Van Halen sounds best when it's just stripped down to the bare essentials, and you can hear all the instruments breathe and everything, and there's space and everything for everything, as opposed to just this sonic assault where every space is filled like it was on A Different Kind of Truth. It tires me to listen to that record as much as, I like the songs and the material, and especially knowing their history and everything. But no, I think that, he wants to have a singer. He's talking about a guy who's like our age or whatever, but he's going after guys who are older than him, which mystifies me when he says that.
Right.
But and there's just not that many guys out there that are, Alex's age or older who can still pull the gig.
Exactly.
But even if you're going to do that, like let's go back through Van Halen's history and see like who has been in consideration, or talked about, or even rumored, get Steven Tyler, who was rumored there for a while to be, actually after Sammy, they were trying to get Steven Tyler in the band. Get Daryl Hall, if indeed he was considered, which I don't really think he was, but if he was, whatever, great, get Eric Turner, get any number of these people and match them up with a song.
I just don't think they should call it a
Pippa from Corrosion of Conformity, get him.
Yeah,
Pippa Keenan.
Pippa Keenan, they don't have to be associated with Van Halen. Just, match people to the song, and don't put the burden on another guy. Don't make another guy into Gary Sharon.
Call it a Van Halen album. Call it, the Van Halen Brothers and Friends or something like that.
Yeah, or a tribute to Ed. There's not been a proper tribute to Ed. How long
Yeah.
has he been gone? Over 5 years now, and there
Yeah.
hasn't been a proper tribute to the guy.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think that's a great idea. They should just frame it as a tribute to Ed album, you know,
Yeah.
and his final appearance, you know, on
They have biffed every opportunity, whether it was the tour they were going to do to the Grammys.
Yeah.
It just
So
goes
October we might get something.
Yeah.
Is the Wolfgang part of this?
Yeah, he's played bass on all the tracks.
He played bass on it, but Wolf is doing his thing with
Right.
Mammoth. That's his focus in the EVH brand, but mostly Mammoth. Really, that's where he is, and and good on him for that, because that's the path he's chosen to take, and that's probably a little bit more noble thing to take. And
He's
to
done
not-
a fabulous job holding his
Yeah.
dad's legacy and doing his own thing. He's really done a great job.
Yeah, and that's that's what I think Ed would have wanted him to do, and it's instead of him riding on his dad's coattails, because that's what he's going to get criticized for doing. Is
Right.
anything that's
Remotely related to Van Halen, right? Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. He should stay as far away as possible, I think. Just
Yeah.
doing what he's doing. He's built this up for how many years now? 5 years he's going, or 6
Right.
years, whatever. Dude, don't stop now, man. Just keep doing what you're doing. And don't,
He's doing a great job.
Yeah.
Get off the internet.
Yep.
Yeah.
Stay away from Van Halen, Wolf. I know it's your family, but still, just keep doing your own thing, man.
But I think, bring this back. I think much credit to Sammy for being able to step in. Sammy oversold himself. We talked about he didn't have any platinum albums when he walked into the band. It was a risk for them, but he delivered, and he brought up his game, and he brought up Van Halen's game. Him and Ed had a good bromance going for a while that, Ed never had with Dave at all. And it was a really interesting and good thing that he did. And, it's an accomplishment, because look at, again, how many people have stepped into those shoes and failed.
Right.
So,
right.
And Ed definitely dabbled with a lot of people. There was a period there where he was working with Chris Cornell, and Fred Durst, that was really weird. But it goes on and on with, Ed was definitely out there seeking, but that's a big role to fill.
Yeah.
And the fact that Sammy was able to step into this thing with this personality, larger than life, David Lee Roth, and still managed to have fans embrace him and sell these records and everything. That's a major, major accomplishment.
Yeah. You know what? Sammy had the chops. Sammy could sing, and and the fact that he just tried to fit in as a bro with them instead of, I think those are the two things that played really well for him, that he could sing. Like when I heard his name, I was like, I don't like his own music. I thought I Can't Drive 55 was a novelty kind of song, but I liked a lot of his other things. It had good melodies, and the guy had a great tone, sound to his voice. So I was like, yeah, I kind of am interested in this. This could be good.
Yeah.
But, like when they had that other guy, remember the guy that goes around saying he was the lead singer for Van Halen for like a week? What was his name?
Oh, Mitch
Malloy.
Mitch Malloy, yeah.
Yeah. When I heard like him singing, I'm like, just no, that would just not have worked. It just no. Survivor, I say he would have been a great to take over in Survivor. You know what I mean?
Right.
That was more his like kind of thing.
Yeah.
Never Van Halen. Sammy worked in Van Halen. His voice. But
it's a tough thing, and I think Sammy also had the benefit of he was a California dude. He was a little bit more Northern California than Southern California, but he's still a California guy.
Yeah.
He had that partying thing, still going on. I remember like all those early Sammy, cruising and boozing and rock and roll weekend and all that other stuff, so he had a little bit of that. Yeah. And a little bit of that surfer vibe thing going on and everything. And like I said, but he was more relatable. He wasn't as threatening as Dave.
Right.
It was just last.
It was a good fit, and it was kind of amazing that the planets aligned, especially in that time that they were so frantically looking for people. And as we talked at the beginning, the fact that there was really like a 3-month span when all this stuff went down and all these ideas were flying around and everything. It's crazy to think about what a whirlwind that was.
Right. Weren't they thinking of a girl at one point?
Yeah, Patty Smythe from
Yes.
Didn't he consider
Scandal
too? Can't have no women in Van Halen. I'm sorry. Women in Van Halen.
Not working.
Women allowed.
Well, and she even realized that. That was the thing. That's why she politely declined the offer, and just, I think that was probably a little bit of the Valerie Bertinelli influence too, a bit, I think. I think Ed was serious about it. I think he really wanted to do that, but I think there was just a, just there was a shift in what he wanted to be, what kind of musician he wanted to be.
So if she said yes,
Sammy. It worked.
So if she said yes, she would have been in.
Do you think Alex would be okay with that?
Yeah, I think she would have if she would have said yes, I think that would have happened, and it probably would have been a very, very strange time.
Wow,
Probably short lived.
Yeah.
I think they would have had some hits. I knowing that time period and everything, I could see it working for a couple singles.
Don't get me wrong, I love Scandal.
Yeah.
But I cannot have women in Van Halen.
Well, when I heard her singing "Whole Lot of Love" on David Letterman that time, I go, yeah, it could have worked a little bit because she did a killer job. Go on YouTube. We'll listen to her sing "Whole Lot of Love" with David Letterman's band. She kills it. She was great.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
All right, boys, we're going to wind it up. Thank you very much for.
Thank you for having me. That was all. I'm so glad to meet all of you.
Yeah, Rich, you got to come back on next time we do a Van Halen show. You got to jump in with us.
Absolutely. Let me know.
I will. Definitely. Let Greg know. It definitely will.
Absolutely. Well, it was great meeting everybody. Have a great night.
Reggie, can you do us a favor? Before you go, can you put your some of your social media links here in the chat? Your Instagram or your YouTube channel or your Facebook page? Can you do
I
that?
don't really have anything. I had a Facebook page. I got hacked. And some guy in Vietnam shut me down. So I do have an Instagram, but the band's Heaven's Edge. I'll see what I can find and put it in the link.
All right, great.
Okay, yeah. Even if you come back later on and put it in the comments here, so that we can share your link here.
Oh, that would be great. I see. So it's the comments and just put it in there.
Yeah. If you can do that, that'll be great. But I agree with Brad. I'm going to do a special shout out. We've got Brad Cook, our good brother here. Can't jump on because he's got a busy weekend in Australia. But
hey, Brad.
Thank you, John, for organising this and getting together. And Chris, especially your opinion and advice and skills.
I got a plug. I got a plug. This is coming out in July.
Oh
yeah. Oh wow. I saw a blow in the background. Wow.
Yeah. Can we do a show? Can you
Chris.
Yes. Can we do a show, please, Chris?
Great cover.
On the
We will
channel?
do a show. It's
Thank you.
It's funny because Tanner, when you were talking about, I tried to interject, but how crazy it gets. But talking about playing drums to a pre-recorded track, like Jeff, we debunked the whole thing. Like Jeff says that Stevie Wonder played the clavinet on Thelonious, and there's no way that happened. I mean, there's any number of reasons why, but Jeff finally the best reason he said is that he had the tape of Stevie playing. Stevie couldn't have been there personally because he was on tour, and we can say this for the conversation, but I'll just say basically it was impossible that Stevie was there, and just the fact that it's so hard to play drums to a pre-recorded track, and especially you're talking about the mid-70s. There's just there's any number of reasons why, but we debunked that in the book. So it's, Jeff could spin a good tale, a good yarn. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Awesome, Chris. We'll definitely go nuts and promote that book
that.
on our social media, mate, because Jeff Beck is one of the giants.
Yes.
Definitely.
It was a heck of a lot of research. It's not a conversations book. It's a deep research, and we talked with a lot of people. I had a lot of extras from my interviews with Jeff, of course, but his career is so big and so long and everything like that. There's so much to cover that, but that's there's a lot of new information in there. So I think it's going to be an exciting read. We're real excited about it coming out.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Can't wait.
Yeah. God bless Jeff Beck. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Tanner, Jimmy, Les Paul, Reggie,
Great to see you guys.
Chris,
Thanks,
Johnny,
guys.
God bless.
So
All right,
long.
guys. We'll talk to you.
We're going to sign off.
keep it waving.
Oh, there you go.